Chapter 81. A faint light flowed out around Chi-Yu's body. The first two colors were black and silver. As soon as Kirin's aura as the king of mythological beasts appeared, Ryue immediately felt that the thundercloud force in her body was about to surge out. After having sex with Chi-Yu, her own thundercloud force and Chi-Yu's thundercloud force had a special tacit understanding. Even they themselves didn't know to what extent they could reach at this late stage. However, when Chi-Yu started to cultivate at such a close distance, Ryue suddenly found that her thundercloud force was actually running according to its usual route without being urged. Moreover, it seemed to be slowly absorbing the aura of Chi-Yu in the process of running. She felt so comfortable all over that she didn't even have that feeling when she usually cultivated. Taking a deep breath, Ryue resisted the urge to cultivate and stared at Chi-Yu's body tenderly. At the same time, she spread her spiritual power outside the villa with the help of the thundercloud force and carefully felt every suspicious aura. Fortunately, it was winter now. Otherwise, maybe the sound of mosquitoes flying would be enough to bother her for a while. The aura of Chi-Yu gradually changed. The original silver and black airflow gradually converged, and the silver-black light flowed faintly. Then, the four colors of thundercloud force, purple, blue, red, and cyan, floated out. After the thundercloud force appeared, it didn't stop, but quietly rotated. At first, Ryue didn't feel anything special, but she soon realized that something was wrong. The cultivation method of the Zodiac Guardian Warriors was based on the ascending Qilin skill, so Ryue was very familiar with Chi-Yu's cultivation method. However, she suddenly found that the thundercloud force that appeared outside of Chi-Yu's body did not seem to circulate according to the cultivation method of the ascending Qilin skill. It seemed to have a special rhythm. She could not explain the rhythm at the moment, but she could feel that the four kinds of thundercloud force revolving around Chi-Yu's body were full of a strange attraction. What was he doing? A big question mark appeared in Ryue's heart. She wanted to use her thundercloud force to wake up Chi-Yu and ask him clearly, but she quickly dismissed the idea. Chi-Yu had asked him to protect him. Obviously, it was because his cultivation today was different from usual, so he asked her to help. In this case, she only needed to protect him. How could she disturb him? After thinking it through, Ryue felt relieved. She sat next to Chi-Yu and continued to feel the influence of Kirin's aura on her. Not long after, Ryue, who had just calmed down, felt that something was wrong again. She discovered that the attractive force emitted from Chi-Yu's body was gradually growing stronger. Although the rate of increase wasn't fast, it maintained a steady increase. What shocked her even more was that there was a huge change in her room. It was a change that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. But as a dragon, she could clearly feel it, because in her room, the energy molecules of various attributes in the air were becoming more and more concentrated. The concentration of energy molecules was of course a good thing for cultivation. But what worried Ryue was that although she could absorb these concentrated energy molecules, they were obviously rejecting her thundercloud force. They were all rushing towards Chi-Yu's body like crazy. Obviously, the reason for the increase of energy molecules was because of Chi-Yu's changed cultivation method. After careful identification, the enhanced energy molecules happened to be the four attributes of thundercloud force that Chi-Yu had. These energy molecules felt very wild, but they were very orderly. They condensed around the thundercloud force that was constantly rotating around Chi-Yu's body. They first followed Chi-Yu's thundercloud force and gradually integrated into Chi-Yu's thundercloud force. This discovery made Ryue surprised and delighted. After all, Chi-Yu's current cultivation method was obviously much more effective than the rising Qilin skill. If this cultivation method was also suitable for her, then the speed of increasing thundercloud force in the future could be greatly increased. However, deep in her heart, she faintly felt that something was wrong. Would there be anything wrong with such an unreasonable increase in the speed of thundercloud force? Perhaps this was the reason why Chi-Yu asked her to protect him. Chi-Yu was indeed too eager for quick success. It was clearly recorded in Kirin's ascending cloud skill that he had to control the speed and amount of energy molecules he absorbed during cultivation. He could not exceed the limit by too much, lest it brought too many negative effects to his body. However, after the battle with the vampire prince, he deeply felt that his strength was far from enough to lead the Zodiac guardian god. Besides, he felt that even if his potential was overexerted, with his Kieran's body, he would be able to recover after some rest. There were still 2 days before the operation, which was just right for him to recover. Therefore, when he cultivated Kieran's ascending cloud skill for the second time today, Chiyu did not deliberately control anything. Instead, he fully unleashed his thundercloud force and fully stimulated his potential to absorb the energy molecules in the air. From the perspective of cultivation, at least at the beginning, Chiyu was very successful. At the beginning of the cultivation, Chiyu quickly found the rhythm of the 2 cultivation methods at the same time, and Kieran's ascending cloud skill came into play very quickly. This was also the situation where Hai Ruyue felt that Chiyu's thundercloud force was absorbing the energy molecules in the air. As time passed, the thundercloud force in Chiyu's body became more condensed, and its volume became larger and larger. With the increase of thundercloud force, the 4 attributes of thundercloud force around Chiyu's body circulated faster and faster. In the beginning, he could still control his mental strength, but as the thundercloud force became larger, his mental strength became a little strained. However, as the thundercloud force gradually became saturated and the thundercloud force increased to a certain extent, he gradually felt that something was wrong. With the increase of thundercloud force, the 4 attributes of thundercloud force around Chiyu's body circulated faster and faster. At the beginning, he could still control his mental strength, but as the thundercloud force grew larger, his mental strength became a little strained. At this time, Chiyu reacted very quickly. He immediately controlled his mental strength to stop the operation of the 2 cultivation methods. However, it had been 3 hours since he started cultivating. Ruyue's entire room was filled with extremely large energy molecules of the 4 attributes. Under the joint effect of these unabsorbed energy molecules and the energy molecules that had integrated with Chiyu's thundercloud force, the energy had exceeded the range that Chiyu's mental strength could bear. Therefore, when he tried to stop it, he was shocked to find that although his mental strength had stopped driving the thundercloud force, the thundercloud force was still running according to the original route. Chiyu knew that he was in trouble. This Kieran's ascending cloud skill was much more overbearing than he had imagined. As soon as this happened, it would not be easy for him to stop it. Due to the panic in his heart, his aura could not help but become a little impure. Chiyu's meridians immediately reacted as a feeling of being cut by knives appeared in every part of his meridians. Chiyu was greatly alarmed. He had seen this before in the ascending Chila method. This was a clear sign of cultivation deviation. Oh my God, if I have chi deviation, I'll be finished. In the crisis, Chiyu immediately calmed his mind, controlled all kinds of messy thoughts in his mind, and put his mental strength back into the thundercloud force. He was still very smart. Although he could no longer organize the thundercloud force to continue to run, with the intervention of his mental strength, even if he couldn't stop it, he could at least delay it a little. As his mental strength reintegrated with the thundercloud force in his body, he pulled himself back from the edge of chi deviation. However, he soon discovered that his mental strength couldn't even slow it down. The thundercloud force that he was eager to improve had become huge to a special level. It was running quickly in his unimpeded meridians. Every time it ran a small cloud, it would absorb a part of the 4 attribute energy molecules around his body again. Chiyu smiled bitterly in his heart. What should I do? The increase of thundercloud force was certainly a good thing. With his Kieran's body, it was probably not a problem for him to withstand a large amount of thundercloud force. But the key was that these thundercloud force were attracted at the cost of stimulating his body's potential. If he attracted too much, I'm afraid that the damage to my body would not be just a little bit. What's more, if he continued to cultivate like this, God knew when he could stop. The stronger the thundercloud force, the more impossible it would be for his mental strength to control it. Was he really playing with fire? Just as Chiyu was constantly thinking about various solutions, a warm energy suddenly flowed into his body along his wrist. The fast-running thundercloud force slowed down. Chi-Yu's meridians that were filled with thundercloud force became smoother under the effect of this warm airflow, and the swelling feeling caused by the thundercloud force also disappeared. However, this warm airflow came and disappeared quickly. When Chi-Yu was still surprised by its appearance, it had already disappeared silently. The thundercloud force returned to its previous speed, and Chi-Yu's cultivation returned to its original state. What happened? What was that energy just now? The Kirin bead definitely couldn't be used. It could only make me absorb thundercloud force faster. Wrist, Yes. Chi-Yu suddenly understood. I have felt this sudden warm energy before. Didn't it come from the relic bead? Why did the relic bead's energy suddenly appear? This was the first question that arose in Chi-Yu's mind. Immediately afterward, he thought of the second question. The relic bead's energy could reduce the speed of his thundercloud force. As long as he could take advantage of the reduction and control the excessive absorption of thundercloud force, wouldn't his current problem be solved? Thinking of this, he returned to the first question. Why did the relic bead's energy appear at this moment? In times of difficulty, Chi-Yu's brain would always become exceptionally sharp. He did not need to think too much to understand the reason behind it. There was only one reason why the relic bead was emitting such energy, and that was because he had almost gone berserk. When Zaglu had given the relic bead to him, he had said that the relic bead would have a supportive effect on his cultivation. Especially during cultivation, it would allow him to calm down and protect his body if he were to go berserk. Previously, because of the change in his mood, he showed signs of Qigong deviation. The Buddha Qi of the relic bead immediately sensed the danger, and thus automatically emitted energy to help him. If that was the case, then if he could experience Qigong deviation again, wouldn't he be able to trigger the relic bead's energy again? Thinking of this, Chi-Yu immediately saw a glimmer of hope. Without any hesitation, he extracted a part of his mental strength. He had to put in a certain amount of effort to maintain a calm state of mind during cultivation, but it was too easy to have distracting thoughts in his mind. Needless to say, just thinking about the scene of the leper girl's mouth was enough to move Chi-Yu's mind. As expected, when the distracting thoughts appeared in his mind and affected his cultivation, an even more intense, tearing feeling appeared in every part of his meridians. Not only did the intense pain not make Chi-Yu flinch, but it also helped him to forcefully condense his mental strength. This time, he did not take the initiative to control his Qigong deviation situation, but actually completely concentrated his mental strength, waiting for the relic bead's energy to come and save him. From the relic bead situation, the more serious his Qigong deviation situation was, the more powerful the relic bead's energy would be. Chi did not think about whether the relic bead's energy had a limit. It was the relic of an eminent monk of 10 generations. Even if he squandered the Buddha Chi's energy, it would not be able to be used up in a short period of time. The intense pain caused Chi-Yu's body to tremble slightly. Hai Ruyue, who was helping to protect him, immediately noticed that something was wrong. Although she had not experienced Qigong deviation, she immediately noticed that something was wrong with Chi-Yu. She quickly floated forward, wanting to help Chi-Yu control his own thundercloud force. However, as soon as her body reached Chi-Yu, she immediately encountered a surge of energy. The energy was full of overbearing power. Before Hai Ruyue could react, her body was immediately bounced back. Just as she was about to take action again, she immediately saw the relic bead on Chi-Yu's wrist light up. A pale green light flowed into Chi-Yu's body through his wrist, and Chi-Yu's trembling body immediately calmed down. At this moment, Chi-Yu was also very nervous. As he had expected, the energy of the relic bead was much stronger than before. It filled his meridians and stabilized the huge thundercloud force. At this moment, Chi-Yu immediately put all his spiritual power into controlling the thundercloud force. Due to the interference of the relic bead's energy, the running speed of the thundercloud force in his body was greatly reduced. At this moment, he immediately put all his spiritual power into controlling the thundercloud force. At this moment, Chi-Yu was even willing to give up some of the thundercloud force that he had absorbed tonight in order to regain control of the running of the thundercloud force. After all, a thundercloud force without control was too terrifying. No one could tell what would happen to it in the end. However, Chiyu still underestimated the thundercloud force that he had accumulated. When the energy of the relic bead disappeared again, Chiyu only controlled a part of the thundercloud force, which was exactly 50% of the total thundercloud force. If he had cultivated like before and controlled 50% of the thundercloud force, Chiyu was completely confident that he could gradually control the rest of the thundercloud force. However, it was different now. Under the influence of Kirin's cloud ascending technique, the thundercloud force that was constantly running in his body was constantly increasing. Now that he had controlled 50% of it, the portion that he controlled was changing very quickly. Although the change was not fast, the portion that he controlled was gradually decreasing. It was almost impossible to control the rest of the thundercloud force. What should I do? Chiyu couldn't help feeling a little anxious. Obviously, the situation just now couldn't be repeated, because as long as his spiritual power left, the thundercloud force that he had controlled with great difficulty would be lost immediately. Even if he used the energy of the relic bead again, it was hard to say whether he could control so much thundercloud force. After all, he had tried his best just now, and he was not confident that the same situation would happen again. However, did he really have to watch the thundercloud force expand like this? Of course, Chi wouldn't do that, but what he could do now was to use the part of the thundercloud force that he controlled to affect the running speed of all the thundercloud force to a certain extent, reducing the running time of each thundercloud force and slowing down his body's absorption of the thundercloud force. However, this could only resolve the crisis temporarily. As the uncontrollable thundercloud force became stronger and stronger, this situation would eventually change. When the thundercloud force regained the absolute advantage, the running speed of the thundercloud force would still be out of his control. Luck was often on the side of the prepared people. Chiyu's cultivation method was not wrong. Although he was a little eager for quick success, he immediately began to use various measures to make up for his mistakes after there were problems. This caused the thundercloud force that had just been absorbed into his body to gradually stabilize and truly integrate with his original thundercloud force. This integration process was very fast, but in the process of integration, Chiyu's thundercloud force also began to change from quantitative to qualitative. Chiyu had been cultivating very hard these days. Since the Battle of Ghost Worry in Tianxiang Mountain, he had been working hard every day. However, because he broke through the third cloud, Kirin's cultivation speed had obviously weakened. As a result, when he was cultivating, the thundercloud force's improvement speed was very slow. Although the thundercloud force had become more condensed after reaching the third cloud, it was not something that could be achieved in a short time if he wanted to reach the next cloud. Despite this, Chiyu's daily cultivation was not without effect. On the contrary, with his continuous cultivation, the thundercloud force in his body was constantly accumulating. Especially in the recent few battles, each consumption and recovery made his thundercloud force have a cycle process, which promoted the condensing degree of thundercloud force. After he merged with Ruyue, under the effect of Ruyue's rising dragon Qi, the thundercloud force in Chiyu's body was condensed again and became purer than before. There was a characteristic of the Qilin ascending technique, which was that when the thundercloud force became condensed, the energy molecules absorbed during cultivation would also become more condensed under the effect of the original thundercloud force and condensed to the same extent as the existing thundercloud force. Therefore, although Chiyu's thundercloud force was still at the third cloud level, its condensing degree had already surpassed the third cloud level. Today, when he was continuously cultivating with the Kirin ascending technique, the energy molecules absorbed in his body gradually became a part of his body through the condensing process. Although Chiyu's comprehensive cultivation was a little reckless, such cultivation could undoubtedly condense more energy molecules. At this moment, he slowed down the circulation speed of the thundercloud force. When the absorbed energy molecules gradually turned into condensed thundercloud force, the quantitative change finally reflected the qualitative change. Ryue was surprised to find that the air in the entire room seemed to be condensed in an instant. A layer of black lines appeared on Chi-Yu's face, and then his black hair instantly turned silver. The air in the room instantly twisted, and all the energy was squeezed into his body at this moment, then relaxed, squeezed again, and relaxed again. After repeating this 3 times, the energy molecules in the air returned to a static state. A huge Kirin pattern rushed out of Chi-Yu's body and completely wrapped his body in it. At this moment, the appearance of Kirin's phantom looked a little different from before. The horn on its head became taller, and its whole body exuded a layer of auspicious light. Compared with the domineering appearance in the past, the current Ink Kirin phantom looked a little more peaceful. Its energy was completely restrained, and even Ryue's rising dragon technique Thundercloud Force would no longer change because of Chi-Yu's Kirin aura. What was going on? Ryue was stunned for a moment. Then she saw the huge Kirin phantom that wrapped Chi-Yu's body suddenly expand, and the pair of big eyes that were originally shining with light moved slightly. Although it was only for a moment, Ryue was surprised to find that she seemed to see the light of thinking from the pair of eyes. She could not help but recall the time when she and Chi-Yu had met the Siege. However, this time, the Kirin phantom only changed for a moment and returned to normal. Before Ryue could react, Chi-Yu suddenly let out a low roar. Then, he suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were completely silver at this time, and the special silver light was as bright as 2 silver gems. In the flickering light, Chi-Yu's body trembled slightly, and his arms slowly stretched outward as if he was lifting a heavy object. The static energy molecules in the room slowly drifted out of the room under the push of his arms. Chi-Yu's body seemed to be in a still space, and the expression on his face looked a little painful and a little twisted. Ryue did not know what to do. At this moment, a weak voice suddenly sounded in her heart. "Help me." The effect of telepathy was fully manifested at this time. Just a moment of telepathy allowed Ryue to understand Chi-Yu's current situation. She immediately flashed behind Chi-Yu without any hesitation and pressed her palms on his broad shoulders. The rising dragon thundercloud force of the same origin poured out unreservedly. With the help of Ryue, the silver light in Chi-Yu's eyes skyrocketed, and he slightly retracted his hands. Then he pushed out with all his strength, and there was a harsh scream in the entire room. The remaining part of the huge energy molecules that had condensed was finally completely expelled. It was separated from Chi-Yu's body. As soon as the energy molecules left, Chi-Yu immediately collapsed in Ryue's arms, panting heavily. Ryue was shocked and hurriedly transferred her thundercloud force into Chi-Yu's body. She tried to help him recover, but she was shocked to find that Chi-Yu's current physical condition could only be described as good, and there was no problem at all. However, on the surface, he looked so tired. The silver light in his eyes had already turned back to the original black, and his eyes were full of fatigue. At this moment, it seemed that he could not even move a finger. "Don't lose to my thundercloud force. I have overdrawn my potential. I need to sleep and rest now. Don't disturb me before I wake up." After saying this with some difficulty, Chi-Yu's body softened, and he fell asleep with his head pillowed on Ryue's plump and elastic chest. Ryue heaved a sigh of relief. Although she did not fully understand what happened to Chi-Yu, she knew that everything had passed. She gently stroked Chi-Yu's hair, carefully lifted his body with her thundercloud force, and helped him to make a more comfortable posture. Although Chi-Yu was unconscious, he did not know that his thrilling cultivation this time had brought great benefits to the other Zodiac Guardian warriors in the villa. At this time, all the Zodiac Guardian warriors were living in the villa. The energy molecules that Chi-Yu absorbed when he completely opened his body was too large. The reason why he was able to forcibly stop at the critical moment could only be described as luck. Under the influence of the relic bead, the cultivation speed had slowed down, and after absorbing a large amount of energy molecules, his thundercloud force had undergone a qualitative change. This change directly raised his thundercloud force from 3 clouds to 4 clouds, and the thundercloud force and water thundercloud force had also risen from 4 clouds to 5 clouds. However, because Chiyu's cultivation this time had consumed too much of his potential, although the ascending Qilin technique had risen to 4 clouds, his spiritual state could no longer absorb the thundercloud force from the blue sea thunder bead, and he had already fallen asleep. It was precisely at the moment when his thundercloud force suddenly rose by 1 cloud, and with the help of Ryua, he broke free from the vortex of cultivation. After Chiyu completely released the energy molecules that he had absorbed, although these energy molecules scattered in all directions, the other Zodiac Guardian warriors in the Dragonfield Villa were also cultivating. They also needed to absorb energy molecules to improve their own strength. The energy molecules in the entire Dragonfield Villa suddenly became stronger, and naturally, the ones who benefited the most were those who were cultivating. Among them, Ryue and Ming Ming benefited the most. Because they were connected with Chiyu, the energy molecules that Chiyu attracted had the least rejection towards them. Therefore, even if Ryue was not cultivating, she still absorbed a lot of energy molecules into her body. She only needed to find time to cultivate for a while, and then she would be able to integrate it into her thundercloud force. Chiyu slept very deeply. He didn't wake up until noon the next day. The sun was shining warmly on his body, but at this time, he didn't have time to enjoy the warmth of the sun. There was not a single meridian in his body that didn't hurt. The pain from inside to outside almost made him groan. Everything that happened during last night's cultivation gradually appeared in his mind. He let out a long breath. He vaguely understood that if he didn't control the cultivation of this Qilin ascending to the clouds art, he would have to advance to the next cloud realm before he could stop. The energy needed to go from 3 clouds to dead clouds was already very large. If he wanted to go from 4 clouds to 5 clouds, he didn't know how much potential he would have to overdraft. Now, Chiyu's body felt very strange. The thundercloud force in Ming Ming's body was unprecedentedly abundant, but his whole body was in pain. Waves of tiredness attacked his brain, and it was very difficult to use even a little strength. The water thundercloud force could heal the injuries of the body, but it didn't help his previous condition. Chiyu knew that only after a period of self-recovery could he return to his original condition. Fortunately, he already had the strength of 3 clouds before cultivating last night, so he didn't make a big mistake. In the future, when he cultivated this Kirin's ascending cloud technique, he really had to be more careful. "You're awake. Do you feel better?" A concerned voice sounded. After a short period of adaptation, Chiyu's body condition was better. When he turned his head, he saw Ming Ming sitting on the chair next to him. Realizing that he had woken up, he quickly walked to the bedside. "It's okay. I'm Kirin." Chiyu smiled slightly. "Why are you here?" "Yesterday, your thundercloud force was consumed too much. Have you recovered today?" Ming Ming gently held Chiyu's hand and said, "Originally, I thought it would take at least 3 days to recover, but last night's cultivation was very smooth. Now, I've basically recovered more than 90%. In the morning, Sister Ryue told me that you had some problems when I guarded you yesterday, so I came to take care of you. Before you woke up, your body was very hot. If it wasn't for the abundant thundercloud force in your body, we would have thought that you had Qigong deviation." Hearing this, Chiyu couldn't help but praise Ryue in his heart. She asked Ming Ming to come over to take care of him. Obviously, she wanted to avoid arousing suspicion. Sigh, "I'd better wait until this matter is over before I confess to Ming Ming." He wasn't afraid of Ming Ming's violent reaction. He just didn't want to cause trouble at this time. At the same time, subconsciously, he more or less felt a little sorry for Ming Ming. Although he was Kirin, this society was monogamous after all. "Don't worry. I was just a little too hasty during cultivation. I just understood a new cultivation method. When I tried it, it was inevitable that I would make some mistakes. It won't happen in the future." Holding Ming Ming's soft hand, Chiyu smiled in satisfaction. Chapter 82. Chiyu smiled and said, "Are you willing? Even if you are, you can't do anything about it. Don't forget that I'm a ruffian. If you divorce me, I'll stick to you like a plaster. Let's see what you can do then." Ming Ming chuckled and said, "You're a ruffian. If you're fine, Hurry up and get up. My brother came early in the morning and has been waiting for you. Although his whole body was still in pain, Chiyu didn't want Ming Ming to worry. He secretly adjusted the thundercloud force in his body. His body floated up from the bed and landed on the ground. His limbs and bones were in severe pain at the same time. However, he had experienced inhuman training in the Taklamakan desert, so the pain was bearable. It turns out that my wicked son is here. Let's go quickly. Ming Ming didn't know that Chiyu was suffering from severe pain. She stretched out her hand and hit his shoulder. She said, "What wicked? Don't talk about my brother like that." Chiyu was in so much pain that his whole body was covered in cold sweat. He smiled bitterly and said, "All right, I'll call him brother-in-law then." Ming Ming blushed and ran out of the door shyly. "Do whatever you want. I don't care." Seeing that Ming Ming had gone out first, Chiyu finally had time to wipe the cold sweat that appeared because of the pain. He found that his body was in extreme pain every time he moved. He had no choice but to condense the wind and cloud force on his whole body to reduce the gravity when he walked. Only then did he feel better. Kirin's ascending cloud force. This time I'm in trouble because of you. Jita was very excited today. He immediately came up to Chiyu when he saw him. Chiyu saw him open his arms as if he was going to hug him. He quickly raised his hand and said, "Don't come over. I'm not interested in you." He didn't object to hugging Jita, but with Jita's strength. If Jita hugged him in such an excited situation, he was afraid that the pain in his body would immediately be exposed. F***CK, Master, I despise you, and I'm not interested in you. I'm just too happy. On behalf of the people in the country, I thank all of you. You are indeed the guardians of the East. You have helped the country solve such a big problem at the most critical time. Jita was so excited that his resolute face looked a little red. At this time, only Chiyu, Ming Ming, and Su Dong, who had already had lunch but hadn't returned to his room, were present among the Zodiac guardian god warriors. Hearing his words, Su Dong laughed and said, "This is the 12th time you've said this today. Can you change it to something new?" Chiyu asked, "So, the problem of vampires has been solved?" Jita nodded his head vigorously. "It's been completely resolved. All the people who were infected with BD have been found. They've all recovered after taking the antidote you brought back. Master, do you know? This time, the country is ready to give a death order to these infected people." Chiyu raised his hand and stopped him from continuing. "All right, it's good that you and I understand. There's no need to say it out loud. If we can't get the antidote, it's indeed the best choice. Since you're fine, I'm relieved. Did you come to me to tell me the good news?" Jita laughed and said, "You can say that. I also came to invite you." Chiyu glanced at Jita and said, "The old man wants to see me? Is it because of the vampires or because of me and Ming Ming?" Jita scratched his head and said both. "Don't worry, this time you helped solve the problem of vampires. The old man is very happy, so he definitely won't make things difficult for you. Besides, the old man has already relented last time, so there won't be any trouble between you and Ming Ming. No matter what, you've established a relationship with my sister, so you should go and see the old man, right? Don't tell me you want to kidnap my sister just like that." Chiyu laughed and said, "Since my future father-in-law wants to see me, how can I not go? I'll leave after I have a meal." Ming Ming stuck out her tongue and said, "After seeing Lin Yifan and the rest, I haven't been back." "Brother, father," Jita imitated General Jijiangming's tone and said, "A grown girl can't be kept at home." Chi rolled his eyes and said, "Tisich, what grown girl can't be kept at home? Don't you also have a girlfriend?" Ming Ming was stunned and looked at Jita strangely. She said, "Brother, you have a girlfriend? Why haven't I heard you mention it?" Jita looked at Chiyu with a bitter smile and said, "Master, I was just about to tell you. In front of the old man, you better not leak it out. The old man is very strict with me. I'm afraid that he—" Chiyu laughed and said, "It can't be. You're not young anymore. Don't tell me that the old man doesn't want to hold a grandson soon. I think it's better for you to be honest. Although Lanya's temper isn't very good, she's still a good person. The old man should like her." Jita's face turned red and said, "Let's talk about this later. In any case, I don't want to get married." At this time, it was not long after lunchtime. Ryue had asked the kitchen to specially leave some food for Chiyu. However, when Chiyu really started eating, it still scared everyone. Originally, Chiyu's appetite was already very shocking. However, today, he became especially different. At the beginning, it was nothing. However, when he ate the 23rd steamed bun and gulped down the 7th bowl of porridge, the gaze that Ming Ming and Jida looked at him changed. Chiyu, are you still not full? Don't overdo it. Ming Ming looked at Chiyu and couldn't help but to remind him. Chiyu kept eating and said with a somewhat blurred voice, "It's nothing. This stomach of mine is a bottomless pit. If it wasn't for me relying on Ryue, I'm afraid that even eating my fill would be a problem. Don't worry, I'm not hurt at all. I still want to eat more. Ask the kitchen to make more food. As long as it is edible, it will be fine." In fact, Chiyu also knew that eating like this was a little scary. However, he found that when he ate more, the pain in his body would be relieved a little. Although it wasn't a lot, it was still quite obvious. He faintly guessed that the main way to recover his potential was to rely on food. As he had the blood of Kirin, his digestive ability was indeed much stronger than the average person. Although this meal only took an hour, he ate more than a dozen servings of food. He only stopped when he really couldn't eat anymore. "Master, I have a very serious question to ask you." As Jida drove, he sternly said to Chiyu, who was burping in the front passenger seat. Chiyu was stunned for a moment and said, "What question?" Jida said, "If you eat so much, my sister won't be able to support you in the future. F*CKU. Huh? Chiyu patted his belly and said with a bitter smile, "But to be honest, I really don't have a source of income. I'm afraid that it will be a little difficult to support Ming Ming in the future." Jida laughed and said, "Master, I'm just joking with you. Don't take it seriously. With your current ability, do you still need a source of income? If you are willing, the country can provide you everything you need." Chiyu said with a smile, "That's good. Aren't our Zodiac, guardian god, warriors, mercenaries of the country?" Jida shrugged and said, "You can't say that. You fight to protect the country. The country has to show some kind of response. If you're willing to join our yellow flame soul, it will be even better." Chiyu shook his head and said, "No, I like a free life. It's good like this. Even if I don't have money to spend, I can still go to Ryue to work." Although he was willing to fight to protect the country, he was not willing to join any of the country's organizations. Although Chiyu did not study much, he understood that once he joined the country's organizations, it would be impossible for him to be as free as he was now. Moreover, he did not want anyone to control him. A person who was used to freedom would not want to be restricted, no matter how good the treatment was. When they arrived at Ming Ming's house, General Ji Zhongming was sitting in the living room reading the newspaper. When they entered the door, he stood up and said with a smile, "You're back." Ming Ming lowered her head and greeted her father. General Ji sighed and said, "You little girl? All right, take a seat." In front of this dignified elder, Chiyu was much more restrained. "Hello, uncle." General Ji let the orderly pour them tea and said to Chiyu, "I really have to thank you for your help this time. I heard from Jida about your encounter yesterday. Without your help, it would have been very difficult for us to solve the problem of these vampires. It seems like no matter when, you Guardians of the East are indispensable to the country." Chiyu smiled and said, "Uncle, there's no need to thank me. Yin Huang is our common country. We will definitely not let any outsiders invade. Those vampires have not left Yin Huang yet. This time, their main purpose is not in the capital." General Ji nodded and said, "I thought about it too. These people from the Western underworld must have some goal in our country. I sent people to investigate, but there were no results. Jida told me about your judgment the last time he came back. It seems like we will have to trouble you again this time. If you need any help, just let me know. Most of the Yin Huang Souls people are in the capital now. I can send some to help you." Chiyu shook his head and said, "That's not necessary. We are not the same kind of people as the Yin Huang Souls mutants. If we work together, we will restrict each other. This time, all the Western factions have gathered in our country. You can imagine their wild ambitions. But whether it is against the Dark Parliament or those Guardians of the West, I think it is better for us to act. Unless it is absolutely necessary, it is best for the country not to interfere. General G's eyes were filled with admiration. We haven't seen each other for a long time. Chiyu, you have become more mature. Actually, this is what I wanted to say to you. Even if I send the Yin Huang Soul's mutants to help you, it cannot be done in the name of the country. Not just those guardians of the West, even those from the Dark Parliament who came to our country have noble identities. Once the country intervenes, it will attract a lot of unnecessary trouble and even international disputes. But I am afraid that you are too weak. You have to know that you are all the pillars of the country. I do not wish for anything to happen to you. Chiyu smiled confidently and said, "Don't worry. Although it is impossible for us to go against all the people who came to Yanhuang, they are not a monolithic block. They are also divided into different factions. As long as we make good use of them, I think even if we cannot achieve their goal this time, it will not be easy for them to achieve it. If it really doesn't work, we can still completely destroy their goal this time. Let them come here for nothing." In terms of strength, it would be a lie to say that he was not worried at all. But Chiyu had already thought about it carefully. Hu Guang and Ian had already begun to cultivate the ascending cloud technique. He believed that they would be able to make use of their own strength very soon. With their addition, the Zodiac Guardian Warrior's strength would be greatly enhanced. In addition, with the 4 great families in the face of external enemies, even if they were dissatisfied with the Zodiac Guardian Warriors, they would definitely choose to cooperate. After all, the right thing to do was to solve the external problems first. Currently, only Athena and the Scorpio Guardian came from Greece, while the Vatican sent people led by Lu Yuan. Although Yu could not be sure if they had hidden strengths that he did not know about. After careful consideration, he felt that even if these 2 parties had hidden strengths, they would not be much stronger than the Dark Parliament. On his side, with the addition of Hu Guang and Ian, and having reached 4 clouds, his overall strength would definitely not be weaker than any of them. Moreover, Yanhuang was his territory after all. Regardless of whether it was the 4 great families or the Sacred Flame sect, they had deep roots in Yanhuang. Their familiarity with Yanhuang, as well as the local customs, were much better than these outsiders. As long as the Zodiac Guardian Warriors made full use of the various situations, they would definitely not be at a disadvantage against the Westerners this time. Of course, if it was possible, Chiyu was not too willing to use the power of the 4 great families. What made Chiyu the most confident was his own strength. Although it was not a qualitative leap from Cloud 3 to 4 clouds, Kiran's strength would almost double with every increase in Cloud. Chiyu's body was still in a weakened state. After he recovered from his weakened state and absorbed the energy of the Blue Sea Thunder Pearl, even if he met the Vampire Prince Klinsman again, Chiyu was confident that he would be able to fight him. General G lowered his head and thought for a few minutes before saying, "How about this? After all, this operation is for the country. Although we cannot openly support you, the country will definitely not sit idly by. Let Jita participate in this operation with you. At the same time, I will give him a certain amount of authority to mobilize a special force to assist you. Although there will not be many people, and they are not mutants, I believe that they will still be very helpful to you." Jita's body trembled. "Dad, you want me to mobilize?" General G nodded and said, "It is also time to test their strength. But you must remember, no matter what, do not let a single person in this force be captured by the Westerners, and even more so, do not let their equipment fall into the hands of the Westerners." Jita stood up abruptly and gave General G Zhangming a standard military salute. Yes, Chiyu could see the intense excitement in his eyes. Just what kind of force was this? From General G's words, it seemed that he was very confident in this force. Ji Zhangming clearly saw the doubt in Chiyu's heart. He smiled and said, "You will know very soon. When we go back, I will let Jita tell you. Also, return the 4-god beast decree to me." Although Chiyu did not know why General G wanted it back, he did not hesitate to touch the Kirin bead on his chest. A light flashed, and the 4-god beast decree appeared in his hand. He handed it to General G with both hands. Ji Zhangming took the decree and took out a small box from his pocket and handed it to Chiyu. The country will never forget what you have done for the country. Chiyu, from now on, I will represent the country to award this diamond badge to you. This is tailor-made for you after discussing with the higher-ups. It is different from the previous diamond badges. It is called the Diamond Guardian Violation. It is specially made for the Guardian of the East. Not only does it represent your identity, but it also allows you to withdraw up to 10 million yen Huang coins from any bank in the country. Also, you do not need any reason to withdraw the funds. It is valid for life. Chiyu looked at General Ji dully. Uncle, this is too precious. Ji Zhongming smiled and said, Take it. Don't worry. I understand the habits of the Guardians of the East. The country will not restrict you. I just hope that when the country is in danger, you can stand up for it. This is what you deserve. You have to spend most of your time on cultivation and protecting the country. The country can only support you with these worldly possessions. What's more, I have to think about my daughter. Now, I'm asking you as a father. Chiyu, no matter what, I hope you can protect Ming Ming. She is my only daughter. Dad. Ming Ming's eyes turned red. She threw herself into General Ji's arms and cried softly. Chiyu solemnly took the brocade box from General Ji's hands. He did not look at it and directly put it into his Kirin bead. Standing up, Chiyu took a deep breath. He said in a deep voice, Uncle, I can't guarantee that the Zodiac Guardian Warriors will appear in every time the country is in danger, but we will definitely do our best. As for Ming Ming, I can't guarantee that she will never be hurt. When he said the last sentence, General Ji, Jita, and Ming Ming could not help but be stunned. Ming Ming stopped crying and looked at Chiyu in confusion. Chiyu's face was very serious, but no matter who wants to hurt Ming Ming, there must be a precondition, and that is I am dead. General Ji smiled faintly and said, The way you youngsters express yourself is completely different from how we used to express ourselves. However, I believe in your determination. Sigh. We of the older generation can't interfere with the matters of you youngsters. Let nature take its course. When you decide to settle down, let me know in advance so that I can prepare for it. I know you're an orphan. From now on, this will be your home. Chiyu naturally understood what General Ji meant by settle down. Looking at the kind light in General Ji's eyes, he was a little touched. Growing up, he did not even have a trace of care from an elder. At this moment, there was a flash of fatherly love in General Ji's kind eyes. Although this feeling flashed by, and even Chiyu did not have time to savor it before it disappeared, he was sure that General Ji had used his eyes and words to clearly tell Chiyu about the matter of Ming Ming. From now on, he had already handed Ming Ming over to Chiyu. Chiyu smiled, different from the usual ruffian smile. This was joy from the heart. Although the engagement between Ming Ming and Lin Yifan was not canceled because of General Ji's words, it was no longer important. To Chiyu, he had never acknowledged that damned engagement. Of course, it was not easy to settle this matter. Chiyu understood that the Greek constellation guardian and the goddess of war and wisdom, Athena, who appeared beside Lin Yifan, would not easily compromise. This was what General Ji meant by settle down. As long as the engagement was settled, this would be Chiyu's home. There was anticipation, encouragement, and some excitement in his words. No matter what, General Ji would not interfere with Ming Ming's matters anymore. He had already handed over the right to handle it to Chiyu. Meeting Ming Ming's gentle gaze, Chiyu's eyes flashed with silver light. A joyful aura was immediately emitted from his body. Ming Ming, who was connected to his aura, naturally felt it as well. The auras that enveloped both of them merged into one. Ming Ming and Chiyu's hearts were connected. At that moment, she felt the joy in Chiyu's heart and also the feelings that Chiyu had for her. Ming Ming was also affected by Chiyu. She stopped the tears on her face and leaned her delicate body towards Chiyu. A blissful smile appeared on her face. Her tear-stained face bloomed with a pink halo, making her look so charming and cute. Although the conversation with General Ji was pleasant, it was not relaxing. After bidding farewell to General Ji, Chiyu became much more dispirited the moment he sat in Jita's carriage. Jita could not help but ask curiously, Master, what's wrong? You don't look normal. Chiyu, it's nothing. I'm just a little tired. If you can lend me your car for another hour, I should be able to get rid of my fatigue." Hearing this, Jita immediately hugged the steering wheel tightly, as if he was afraid that Chiyu would take it from him. He said, "Okay, pretend I didn't say anything. I didn't see anything. I'll send you back first." When they returned to Dragonfield Courtyard, Hai Ryue was already waiting at the door. This was the first time that Hai Ryue appeared in front of Chiyu. Although he was a little tired, when he saw Hai Ryue's concerned expression, Chiyu seemed to feel a little better. However, his appearance was still a little worried in Hai Ryue's eyes. This was because Chiyu's current appearance was much worse than when he left. Could it be that something had happened? It must be known that Kirin's self-recovery ability was very strong, but ever since last night's cultivation, Chiyu's state had been very strange. Obviously, something had gone wrong during cultivation. Jita left after sending Chiyu and Mingming back. His mind was filled with excitement. Ever since General Ji handed him that special unit, he had been in a state of excitement. He knew what kind of unit he was in charge of. As a soldier, to be able to lead such a unit was his dream. That kind of desire was as urgent as his pursuit of strength. Moreover, the most important reason was that after meeting Chiyu, the strength that he had been proud of had become insignificant. Although he had been taught by his grandmaster, in front of Chiyu and the other Zodiac Guardians, he was basically the weakest one. So much so that when he was with them, he couldn't help much and felt very useless. This was very sad for a person who advocated strength and strength. However, all of this would change very soon. The important thing was that once he took over that special unit, it would be different. Although it wouldn't bring much strength to him, it could change his identity as a bystander. With the special unit's equipment and strength, he could at least help when Chiyu and the others were in action. In the car, Mingming also saw that Chiyu's state was not right, so she and Ryue sent Chiyu back to his room. As soon as he reached his room, Chiyu relaxed and immediately fell on the bed. A strong sense of exhaustion suddenly hit him. He had never wanted to sleep as much as he did now, so much so that he didn't even have the strength to tease the two beauties beside him. As soon as his eyelids closed, he almost immediately fell asleep. The excessive overdraft of his potential could not be recovered by sleeping for half a night yesterday. Ryue said with some worry, his current situation doesn't seem to be caused by the thundercloud force. However, Chiyu has always been full of energy. How did he suddenly become like this? "Sister Ryue, why don't we ask Master Zagru? Maybe he knows." Mingming's reminder immediately got Ryue's approval. Leaving Mingming to look after Chiyu, Ryue immediately went out to find Zagru. Not long after, Master Zagru came to Chiyu's room under Ryue's lead. Zagru was obviously very concerned about Chiyu's situation. As soon as he entered the room, he went straight to the bed. Master Zagru put his index finger, middle finger, and ring finger on Chiyu's wrist. A soft white light flowed into Chiyu's body through his fingers. Closing his eyes, Zagru carefully sensed Chiyu's current situation. After a while, he slowly opened his eyes and said in a strange tone, "From the signs, Chiyu's body is fine, but his potential seems to have been overdrawn. According to the thundercloud force, after advancing from 3 clouds to 4 clouds, he shouldn't be weak. Every time Kirin advances 1 cloud, his strength doubles. Logically speaking, Chiyu's energy should be infinite now, but the reason is that his thundercloud force is abundant, but he's very tired. In my opinion, it's probably because of his cultivation method. You should all know that Kirin's cultivation speed is relatively slow compared to the Zodiac Guardians, especially the 4-cloud auspicious Ink Kirin. In the past, no Kirin's thundercloud force has been improved as fast as Chiyu's. In the same period of time, you Zodiac Guardians have at most advanced 2 clouds. Of course, except for the Zodiac Guardians who were born with Awakening. Ryue and Mingming, your cultivation speed is the best among the others, but you only advanced a little more than 1 cloud, while Chiyu only used half a year to advance to 4 clouds. Especially the process from 3 clouds to 4 clouds, it seems to be too fast. Even I can't explain this terrifying speed. Kirin, especially Ink Kirin, has too many unpredictable things. As long as there are no problems with his body and mind, any special situation is possible. You'd better be mentally prepared for it in advance. At the same time, in case of abnormal situations, protect his safety. If I'm not wrong, Chi must have felt that his strength is not enough. So he used some special method to forcibly improve his thundercloud force, which led to the improvement of thundercloud force, but his body was overdrawn. I suddenly understood and said, that should be the case. I seem to have heard him say that he has overdrawn his potential. Grandmaster, will there really be no problem with this? Grandmaster Zagru smiled bitterly and said, among the previous Zodiac Guardian warriors, Kirin, the king of the Zodiac who could reach the 4-cloud strength, was very rare. As for Kirin's own situation, even we, the Heaven's Guide, have a lot of secrets that we are unable to find out. However, Chiyu has a sense of propriety. I think, since he has decided to do this, he must have his reasons. You can rest assured. Chiyu is in a deep sleep. Hai Ryue and Ming Ming did not have the heart to disturb him, but neither of them were willing to leave his side at this time. Hence, the two girls cultivated on either side of Chiyu. Of course, the reason was to protect Chiyu. While cultivating, they also maintained a certain level of vigilance. Both of them left some of their spiritual force in the surroundings. If there was any danger, they would wake up at the first moment to protect Chiyu. Hai Ryue and Ming Ming were connected with Chiyu's mind. Their auras were related. Hai Ryue's connection was established through the connection between her and Chiyu's soul and flesh, while Ming Ming's body contained Kirin's blood. Although the two of them established the connection between their auras and Chiyu's were different, they reached the same goal by different means. In this aspect, the two of them were equal. However, while cultivating, the benefits that Kirin's aura brought to them had changed. In the past, as long as they cultivated next to Chiyu, their cultivation speed would be greatly improved because of Kirin. But now it was different. Hai Ryue could get more benefits than Ming Ming. This did not mean that the connection between Ming Ming and Chiyu, who had Kirin's blood, was not as deep as Hai Ryue's, but because of the overdraft of Chiyu's potential. The thundercloud force in Chiyu's body was very pure, and the thundercloud force was very abundant. Although the overdraft of potential could make Chiyu tired, it would not cause Chiyu physical pain. When Chiyu used Kirin's ascending cloud technique to enhance his thundercloud force, due to the compression of too many energy molecules, even in Kirin's powerful self-healing ability, it could not be completely healed in a short period of time. When Chiyu recovered his potential through sleep, the thundercloud force in his body was in an unrestrained state. In this way, Hai Ryue, who was cultivating next to him, gained more benefits than before. Chapter 83. Hai Ryue and Ming Ming both understood this and knew that cultivating at this time was beneficial to them. Even so, they still put protecting Chiyu as their top priority. Chiyu is at his weakest now. Chiyu slept until noon the next day before he woke up. The full night's sleep had restored a lot of his overdrawn potential, and his physical condition was at least 50% of what it used to be. As soon as Chiyu woke up, he found that his thundercloud force and water thundercloud force had greatly improved. The energy of one of the remaining 8 blue sea thunder beads in his body had greatly decreased. Its energy was almost completely consumed, and it was obviously absorbed by his body. After a day's sleep, his 2 thundercloud force had been pushed to the 5th cloud realm. The advancement of 1 cloud meant that his overall strength had been doubled. His thundercloud force and water thundercloud force had also soared. Even he didn't know what effect these 2 thundercloud force could have. It was Hai Ryue who found out that Chiyu had woken up. When she felt that the thundercloud force she obtained had decreased, she knew that Chiyu had woken up. She controlled her own thundercloud force to quickly complete a cloud cycle and open her eyes. Full of concern, she said, "You're awake." "Yes." These 3 short words made Chiyu feel warm. This was not the Tyrannosaurus Rex of the past, but a kind wife and loving mother. However, Chiyu didn't have time to think about this. This was because he suddenly discovered a very big danger signal. This danger came from Ming Ming. Through their telepathic connection, He felt that he had woken up at a very bad time. Ming Ming's ascending cloud method was affected by his Kirin's aura and Kirin's bloodline. It actually made a breakthrough in a short period of time, and it just so happened that it was the critical moment to advance to the fifth cloud. He woke up, and Kirin's aura weakened automatically to support her cultivation. At that moment, Ming Ming's state of mind fluctuated, and the originally orderly thundercloud force was disrupted. Although Ming Ming seemed to be fine, Qi Yu, who was connected to her aura, naturally understood her current situation. He didn't have time to say anything to Hai Ruyue. He immediately jumped up, landed behind Ming Ming, and pressed his palms on her shoulders. Hai Ruyue was shocked by Qi Yu's actions, but it was only a momentary shock. Although she didn't have telepathic connection with Ming Ming, she immediately understood the situation from Qi Yu's anxiety and energy output. A four-colored light was emitted from Qi Yu's body along with a powerful aura, wrapping Ming Ming's body like a large cocoon. At this moment, his eyes became a strange black and silver. Kirin's silhouette floated out from behind him, and a powerful Kirin's aura instantly filled the entire room. Qi Yu of the fourth cloud was already comparable to Hai Ruyue of the sixth cloud, who had two element mutations. Naturally, he was much stronger than Ming Ming, who was about to advance to the fifth cloud realm. Under the effect of his pure Kirin thundercloud force, Ming Ming's slightly scattered thundercloud force was forcefully retracted back into her meridians. Although the advancement of the thundercloud force depended on one's own cultivation, with Qi Yu's assistance, Ming Ming could break through without any worries. Moreover, there was the amplification effect of Kirin's aura. Ming Ming, who had reached the critical point, trembled slightly. Almost in an instant, her delicate body emitted a layer of beautiful seven-colored light. Although she didn't enter the state of mutation, her short hair was already dyed seven-colored, and the golden light surrounding the seven-colored light was even stronger than before. After the thundercloud force erupted, it immediately retracted. Qi Yu's eyes shone brightly, and he shouted, "Appear!" Ming Ming only felt that the meridians in her body seemed to have disappeared in an instant. A huge amount of energy of various attributes rushed into her body, and the thundercloud force instantly condensed to an unprecedented height. Although the amount of thundercloud force didn't change, it had already advanced to the fifth cloud realm. Letting out a long breath, Qi Yu slowly retracted his thundercloud force into his body. The light in his eyes returned to normal. He smiled and said to Rhea, "That was close. Fortunately, I discovered it early. Otherwise, Ming Ming might have gone berserk." Looking at Ming Ming, who had calmed down and continued to cultivate, Ryue said, "I didn't expect her to improve so quickly. Qi Yu, how is your body? The master said that you overexerted your potential to improve your strength to a higher level. I know you are eager to get stronger, but don't do this in the future. Although I don't know how Kirin's cultivation method is, it's not good to go against the laws of nature." Qi Yu nodded and said, "I also didn't expect Kirin's ascending cloud technique to be so overbearing. Don't worry, my body condition has already recovered to a certain extent. When we move with those guys from the Vatican, I should be able to recover." Ryue nodded gently and said, "Do you want to eat something?" Qi Yu laughed and said, "Of course. I found that in order to recover my potential, besides resting, eating is very important. Let's go. You guys have been guarding me and haven't eaten." Ming Ming has just reached the five clouds realm and still needs to cultivate for a period of time to accumulate thundercloud force. My aura is closely connected to hers, so if there's a problem, I will be able to detect it immediately. Let's have lunch in the afternoon. Qi Yu had just eaten a delicious meal that was enough for 10 people when he received a call from Li Yuan. "Hello, Mr. Qi." Qi Yu said, "It seems that our agreed time is tomorrow. You're calling a little too early." Lu Yuan smiled and said, "It's better than late, isn't it? How are the preparations on Mr. Qi's side?" Qi Yu glanced at Ryue beside him and said, "We have nothing to prepare here. We can leave at any time. What about you?" Lu Yuan seemed to think for a moment before replying, "How about this, Mr. Qi? Let's meet now. I will tell you what we know in detail. The departure time is still set for tomorrow." Qiyu said, "Okay, tell me the location." Although the cooperation with the Vatican was beneficial for the time being, for him, what he wanted to know the real purpose of those Westerners coming to Yanhuang was the most. Lu Yuan set a coffee shop in the downtown area of the capital city and hung up the phone. Ryue asked, "What did he say?" Qiyu said, "He asked me to meet. You should go with me." "Oh, right. Let Su Dong protect Ming Ming." All the Zodiac Guardian warriors were training in the Dragon Field courtyard since the battle with the Covenant of Darkness. Everyone had the same idea as Qiyu. Only true strength was the most important, so they were all training in their own rooms. Even Hu Guang and Ian stayed in the Dragon Field courtyard. The teaching affairs of the Sacred Flame sect were already on the right track. For them, leaving for half a month was not a problem. Although they had just joined the ranks of the Zodiac Guardian warriors, they did not have much sense of justice. However, their xenophobic mentality was very strong. These two guys always wanted to see the world in chaos. This time, when the Westerners came to Yanhuang, they could not wait to fight. Therefore, they did not consider anything at all. Yesterday, they agreed to let Master Zagru stay and participate in this operation. Ryue drove her Lamborghini and Qiyu to the city very quickly. When they arrived at the door of the coffee shop, they immediately attracted the attention of many passers-by. Of course, Qiyu is the kind of person who is automatically filtered. Ryue and her Lamborghini were the standard beauties. It would be strange if they did not attract attention. However, no one dared to come up and strike up a conversation. After all, other than Qiyu, Ryue's coldness was not something that anyone could withstand. Lu Yuan was very punctual. He had already arrived. When he saw Qiyu and Ryue walk into the coffee shop, he immediately greeted them. Lu Yuan chose a quiet corner. It was just past noon, so the coffee shop was very quiet. It was very suitable for chatting. Today, Lu Yuan was dressed in a relatively casual outfit. He had a handsome face. And a noble temperament. Qiyu had to admit that this guy in front of him easily gave people a good feeling. "Please take a seat. What would you like to drink?" Lu Yuan did not seem to be in a hurry at all. He made an elegant gesture and invited the two to take a seat. Ryue knew that Qiyu did not know much about coffee. She said indifferently, "2 cups of mocha." Qiyu steadied his mind. He knew that he couldn't show any signs of anxiety at this time, lest the other party see through him. He found a comfortable position to sit on the chair and looked at Lu Yuan. He didn't say anything and quietly waited for his coffee to arrive. Lu Yuan had been observing Qiyu and Ryue silently since they came to the coffee shop. Qiyu's calmness made him not see any flaws. He took a sip of the coffee in front of him and said, "Mr. Qi, I have already asked the Vatican. His Holiness the Pope attaches great importance to this matter. After consideration, he confirmed the cooperation between both sides. In fact, the Vatican has never hoped to get anything. We just don't want that holy object to fall into the hands of the Covenant of Darkness or any evil party. In that case, it will even cause harm to the whole society. Therefore, I hope that we can cooperate wholeheartedly this time to get the holy object. As for the ownership of the holy object, we can discuss it after we get it. What do you think?" Of course, Qiyu would not easily believe Lu Yuan's words. Who didn't know how to say such things? He smiled and said, "It seems that the Vatican thinks the same as us Guardians of the East. We don't really want to get that thing, and we don't want it to be obtained by evil people. Therefore, we are very sincere about this cooperation. His Holiness the Pope got the news through astrology. We also have some information. Since we're going to cooperate, I hope you can tell us the information you have got. In this way, we can better cooperate, right?" Lu Yuan still had a harmless smile on his face. "Of course, that's for sure. I'm here today to tell you the information we know, so that I can go with you tomorrow." Qiyu thought of something and said, "This time the people the Vatican sent are the people I saw that day. In terms of strength, the people you sent seem to be much weaker than the Covenant of Darkness. This should not be the real strength of the Vatican." A faint light flashed in Lu Yuan's eyes. Qiyu had been staring at him, so he clearly caught a trace of surprise in his eyes. "Of course, we are not the only ones. However, because we are Westerners, it is not as convenient as you Guardians of the East, so we have already gone to the destination in batches. After all, this is the Yin-Wang Republic. If too many of us go together, it is easy to cause misunderstanding. Please forgive us. Hai Ryua said coldly. So, your people have already gone? Lu Yuan made a helpless gesture and said, this can't be helped. We have to arrange the itinerary. But you two can rest assured that after we set off for the destination tomorrow, we will soon meet up with our people. After all, the Vatican is not willing to face the other forces with ulterior motives alone, right? Chiyu said indifferently, I hope you don't lie to us. Otherwise, it would not be good for you. You also said that this is the Yin-Huang Republic. No one can be more familiar with our country than us. Now you can tell us everything you know. Lu Yuan could not help, but secretly let out a sigh of relief when he saw that Chiyu did not flare up. According to the arrangement of the Vatican, the first to arrive at the destination would naturally have more opportunities. At least, he could understand more about the situation. As for the cooperation with the Zodiac Guardian Warriors, he did not think much about it. From any perspective, a temporary cooperation was a wise choice. He thought for a while and said in a low voice, this matter starts from 3 years ago. When Chi Yu and Hai Ryua heard that they were starting to get into the main topic, they immediately focused their attention. Chi Yu found that there was a faint layer of energy emitting from Lu Yuan's body. The energy did not pose any threat to them, but it easily isolated the sound from the three of them. 3 years ago, the Pope observed the sky and suddenly saw a star of destiny rising in the east. Through complicated astrology and the powerful ability of the Pope to communicate with God, he used all kinds of methods, but he still could not see the true position of the Star of Destiny. Star of Destiny? What's that? Chi Yu asked curiously. Lu Yuan said, the so-called Star of Destiny is a person or a group that can affect the fate of the whole world. It's hard to explain. My astrology skills are really poor, so I can't explain it to you too. I can only tell you that His Majesty the Pope attaches great importance to this Star of Destiny. He once said that this Star of Destiny is related to a huge disaster in the future and whether humanity can survive it or not. For this Star of Destiny, His Majesty the Pope used astrology to calculate every day, hoping to find it. But after trying for a whole year, he still could not find it accurately. Maybe it's because the energy contained in this Star of Destiny is too great. At that time, His Majesty the Pope once said that the accumulation of history and some things that human beings cannot compete with are very difficult to understand. However, during that year, although His Excellency the Pope did not discover where the rising star of destiny was in the east, he discovered a strange phenomenon through astrology. Chi Yu and Ryua exchanged a look. They knew that they were going to get to the point. Lu Yuan continued. This star of destiny has a very great amount of energy. But under the cover of this enormous energy, there is a very strange energy in the east. That energy is very condensed, and it has a very special aura. That aura is called sadness. That sorrowful energy is beyond our imagination. What's even more shocking is that that energy actually contains powerful holy power, a very pure holy power. Perhaps the two of you have already discovered that the holy power of the Vatican leans towards the light and fire attributes. But even the holy power of the 12 holy knights of the Holy Church can't compare with the holy power that is full of sadness. If it's just a pure holy power, it's fine. But according to His Majesty the Pope, this holy power is very absorbable. It should be stored in a tool or a container. It can be said that if any one of us in the Holy Church absorbs this holy power, our overall energy will be comparable to that of His Majesty the Pope. Therefore, we call this holy power the sacred source. Chi Yu suddenly interrupted Lu Yuan. If that's the case, what does the Holy Church have to worry about? The holy power that you're talking about can only be absorbed by the people of the Holy Church. If that's the case, why did the Greek Guardians and the Covenant of Darkness get involved? And as far as I know, the other forces don't understand it this way. Lu Yuan smiled bitterly and said, that's the problem. If the sacred source is just holy power, no matter how powerful it is, I'm afraid that the Holy Church will not risk offending the Yanwang Republic to come to your country. The key is the sad aura in the sacred source. With the help of astrology, His Majesty the Pope calculated that the energy of the sacred source will reach its peak soon. Over the past 2 years, His Holiness the Pope discovered through careful research that although the energy of the sacred source is very similar to our holy energy, the sorrowful aura within it is also filled with negative emotions. There is intense sadness, and there is also intense hatred. Every stream of energy has become very unpredictable. Therefore, although the energy of the sacred source is the holy power that we want the most, the negative aura and absorbability it contains can be absorbed by anyone with special abilities, including the people of the Covenant of Darkness. With the power of the Covenant of Darkness, as long as it is as powerful as the vampire Prince Klinsman, he can use the negative aura to transform the energy of the sacred source into what he needs. If that happens, I'm afraid that there will be a great demon king that no one can fight against in this world. When that time comes, the situation where we have been suppressing the Covenant of Darkness will change. Therefore, we have to come to your country. Even if we can't get the sacred source, we can't let the sacred source fall into the hands of the Covenant of Darkness. After listening to Lu Yuan's words, Qi Yu and Hai Ruyue finally had a general understanding of this holy relic. According to Lu Yuan, this time, the major forces came to the Yanhuang Republic for this energy that could be absorbed. On Earth, everything had its own energy, and the arrangement of energy molecules was different. Generally speaking, only the energy molecules in the air could be absorbed, but the energy molecules in the air were too sparse. It was not impossible to become a strong person by absorbing these energy molecules, but it would take a long time. This was also the reason why, during the era of ancient beasts, both divine beasts and ferocious beasts had to cultivate for thousands of years before they could become super strong people. Qi Yu's Kirin's ascending cloud technique actually accelerated the absorption of the energy molecules in the air. However, it did not mean that the energy of other things was inferior to the air. No matter what, it had its own energy, but the amount that could be absorbed was too little. Although the energy contained in some things could be absorbed, it would also have a great impact on the body. After all, the energy contained in everything was different, and each had its own special changes. Therefore, the so-called absorbable energy sounded simple, but it was too difficult to find an energy source that could be directly absorbed by the human body. After listening to Lu Yuan's description, Qi Yu could not help but be tempted. Although there was no light attribute among his 4 types of thundercloud force, Lu Yuan said that a force like the vampire Prince Klinsman could transform and absorb this energy. Since he himself belonged to the dark attribute and could absorb the light attribute, he would definitely be able to do it too. Thinking of this, Qi Yu could not help but feel a little excited. It was impossible to say that he did not want to obtain this so-called sacred source. After all, everyone had the desire to become stronger. Then did your Pope find the location of the sacred source through astrology? Hai Ruyue asked, perhaps because Lu Yuan looked very sincere. Hai Ruyue's tone was no longer as cold as before. Lu Yuan nodded and said, His Holiness the Pope's astrology is very miraculous. Except for the Star of Destiny, which is too ancient to be accurately calculated, other powerful energy bodies can be located in a short period of time. When His Holiness discovered the existence of the sacred source, he did not have the intention to send people to the Yanwang Republic. Not long ago, when he carefully studied and discovered the uncertainty of the sacred source energy, he had no choice but to send us. Speaking of which, His Holiness was initially unwilling to send people to search for the sacred source. One reason was that the location of the sacred source was constantly changing, and it would even hide after a period of time. The other reason was that he did not want to have a conflict with your country's Eastern Guardian. After all, we all exist to protect this world. Although our beliefs are different, we can be said to be like-minded. Qi Yu said indifferently, very well said. All right, let's not talk about the information we received. So, where exactly did you find out? He vaguely guessed that things were not as simple as Li Yuan said. If not for the uncertainty of the sacred source's location and its frequent hiding, perhaps the Vatican would have already made a move. The truth was just as Qi Yu had predicted. After the Vatican discovered the existence of the sacred source, they had been preparing to come to Yanhuang to search for it. However, the frequent disappearance of the sacred source made things difficult for them. This was because the location of the sacred source was different every time, which made it difficult for them to determine its specific location. After 3 years of research, the Pope finally discovered the pattern of the appearance of the sacred source. No matter how strange the time and place of its appearance was, it would stay at a fixed place for a period of time every year. After confirming this period of time, the Vatican had sent people to the Yanhuang Republic, hoping to bring it back. Lu Yuan sighed and said, "I'm not afraid that the two of you will not be able to digest the information about the sacred source." The main reason why the information about the sacred source was leaked was mainly because there was an internal problem. Originally, the existence of the sacred source was our internal top secret. However, we did not realize that there was a traitor within the Vatican. He blasphemed against God's blessing and actually turned to the covenant of darkness at the most critical moment, revealing this secret. The covenant of darkness is a place where people of good and bad mix together. Since they received the news, the spies of various forces in the covenant of darkness naturally received it as well. Therefore, the Sun Nation and the Greek Guardian appeared. If not for this, we would not have to go through so much trouble. Qi Yu did not ask who the traitor was in the Holy Church. Even if he thought with his toes, he could guess that the traitor was a bishop with high authority in the Holy Church. So that's how it is. The Vatican is too careless. You have been fighting with the covenant of darkness for so many years, but you did not even know that there was a big spy in the Vatican. Qi Yu said with some disdain. Lu Yuan's expression changed slightly, but he quickly returned to normal. No one wanted this to happen, but since it has already happened, we can only try our best to make up for the mistakes we have made. We can minimize the losses. The Pope sent us here this time, and the main mission is to prevent the sacred source from falling into the hands of the covenant of darkness. We will not hesitate to destroy it. Hai Ryue was slightly angry. Since the sacred source has appeared in the Yanhuang Republic, it is the property of Yanhuang. Do you think we can destroy it just because you say so? Lu Yuan was stunned. This is not something that I can decide. But no matter what, since we are working together, let's get the other greedy people out of the game first. There is still time to argue. Lu Yuan drank the coffee in his cup. Let's end our conversation here. When and where do we meet tomorrow? Lu Yuan said, "Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock at Beijing International Airport. I have already booked a flight at 10 o'clock. The flight number is FM 30293. This is a luxurious flight, so there are fewer people on it. You should also book the tickets when you go back. We will meet directly at the airport tomorrow, and I will take you directly to your destination. We will fly directly to Kunming first, and then from there we will transfer to your country's Dali Chongming Temple." On the way back to the Dragonfield courtyard in Ryue's Lamborghini, Qi Yu was in a good mood. Before they parted, Lu Yuan finally revealed the destination of this trip. The aura of the sacred source had already appeared, and the specific location was near Yunnan Dali Chongming Temple. No one knew 100% of the specific location, so they could only slowly search there. "Ryue, how credible do you think Lu Yuan's words are?" Qi Yu asked as he leaned comfortably on the bucket seat of the Lamborghini. Ryue said, while driving, "At least 70% of it can be believed." "Oh, that high?" Qi Yu looked at her in surprise. Ryue nodded and said, "Think about it. He wants to use us now, and he is not sure how much we already know, so it is impossible for him to lie to us about certain things. Otherwise, how can we cooperate with them? Therefore, what he said about the sacred source and the specific location should not be false. Because even if we know the location, there are still several other forces around, and it will not be easy to succeed. Therefore, in his understanding, we must also cooperate with the Vatican, just like how he wants to cooperate with us now. That's the truth. Although your and Mingming's abilities have increased, we can only deal with one side at most, be it the Vatican, the Dark Parliament, or the Greek Guardians. Once we become the target of everyone, it'll be difficult for us to succeed. Under the premise that we're using each other, we must cooperate closely with them. Therefore, he has to show some sincerity to make us believe in them. Because of this, I said that we can believe 70% of his words. Of course, the remaining 30% may be the key to this sacred source, so he will definitely not tell us, so we can only rely on ourselves to figure it out. Chi-Yu smiled. 70% is enough for us at the moment. Perhaps our Zodiac Guardian Warriors are not the strongest at the moment, but in terms of growth, none of them can compare to us. As long as we have a clear destination, it is hard to say who will be the winner in the end. Ryu has said with a smile, that depends on you. This is the first time you're leading all the Zodiac Guardian Warriors on a mission. You have to think more. Although on the surface, we Zodiac Guardian Warriors are very united, but we all have our own strength. If you want everyone to acknowledge you as the king of the Zodiac, you have to show what you were supposed to do, not only in terms of strength, but also in terms of command and leadership. Chi-Yu smiled bitterly. If it was not for the fact that you have to be busy with work and the Zodiac Guardian Warriors, I really don't want to be the king of the Zodiac. It is so tiring. Chapter 84. Chi-Yu froze for a moment. Damn you. Sister Ryue, you're a powerful Tyrannosaurus Rex. Ryu rolled her eyes at him, her beautiful eyes revealing a charming look that made Chi-Yu's wicked heart move. Who says that dragons don't need protection? Every time I think of your bravery in protecting Ming Ming, I'm indescribably envious. So, are you going to protect her or not? Of course, I'm going to protect her. So annoying. Where are your hands going? Ryue, this is my new unique skill, breast grabbing Kira in hand. Pervert. I prefer to hear you call me a pervert. Don't touch my thighs. I'm driving. When the two returned to Dragon Field Courtyard, Ryue spent a full 10 minutes in the car to tidy up her clothes. We're having a meeting, Chi-Yu shouted as soon as he entered the villa. His voice was transmitted through his Kirin Thundercloud Force. Due to the effect of Kirin's aura, under his clever control, his voice could be heard by everyone in the villa, but it wouldn't affect everyone's cultivation. Not long after, Vol and Yin Xiaoi came down from upstairs. Boss, what's the meeting? Vol asked curiously. Chi-Yu said, we're going to take action tomorrow. Let's talk about it, and see if anyone has any good suggestions. Yin Xiaoi looked particularly happy today. His eyes were shining, and his aura seemed to have changed. Chi-Yu said in surprise, Xiaoi, did your Thundercloud Force improve? Yin Xiaoi smiled and said, Thundercloud Force hasn't reached the second cloud yet, but I learned a new Zodiac ability. It's very powerful. Vol smiled and said, I know. Vol said, isn't it one of the Zodiac's super abilities, impotence? How can I not know? Why don't you go to hell, short-sighted guy? Chi-Yu laughed. Well, can you two not quarrel as soon as you meet? Xiaoi, what ability is it? Yin Xiaoi regained his proud look. I won't tell you now, but you'll know in the future. Maybe it will surprise you. At this time, the other Zodiac warriors also came to the hall downstairs. Guanping was still as gentle as usual, Modi was as calm as ever, and Ming Ming came down together. On the surface, Ming Ming didn't seem to have changed much, but Chi-Yu knew about her training today. After careful observation, he found that Ming Ming's eyes were brighter than before, and there was a faint layer of gold in them. Ming Ming, congratulations. Chi-Yu greeted Ming Ming with a smile and held her hand. Ming Ming blushed and lowered her head. Everyone's here, don't be like this. Little Yi chuckled and said, she's clearly shy. There's something wrong with your words. You mean that if we're not here, boss can do whatever he wants? Ming Ming glared at him and said, you're asking for a beating, aren't you? Yin Xiaoi pretended to be wronged. You guys only know how to bully me. Who asked me to be weak? How pitiful. The last to come down from upstairs was the wretched duo. Hu Guang and Ian both looked in high spirits. Of course, even if they were in high spirits, their wretched appearance couldn't be changed. Especially Hu Guang, who was wearing big slippers and a cotton coat. It made people want to laugh. What are you talking about? You look so happy. Let's listen. Hu Guang's small eyes behind the bottom glasses rolled around, and a lewd smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Chi-Yu said, you don't look like a snake, but more like a cunning fox. How's your ascending cloud cultivation going? As soon as he saw Hu Guang, he remembered the time when Hu Guang fired the rocket launcher against the Dark Parliament in the warehouse. Although he and Ian looked inconspicuous and not wretched, under their lewd appearance hid an extremely shrewd heart. Ian rushed to say, "I've already cultivated to 4.5 clouds, just a little stronger than someone." Wolsh asterisk T, how are you stronger than me? Ming Ming, I'm much stronger than you. Don't forget what Master said. I'm the most venomous snake, unlike a bald monkey like you. Hu Guang immediately retorted, the most venomous snake? Chi looked at Hu Guang curiously. Hu Guang said proudly, are you afraid? Master said that before I truly cultivated the ascending cloud cultivation method, I couldn't even use 1/10 of the snake's venom. As my thundercloud force gets stronger and stronger, the venom will also get stronger and stronger. Ian said disdainfully, venom is venom, but what's the use of venom? Didn't Master also say that because you have the ability of the most venomous snake, other than your high resistance to physical attacks, your venom is the only thing you can use? What the F asterisk CK is the most venomous? If you're the most venomous, then what am I? With a disdainful voice, Chiyu only felt the energy in his body move slightly, and a black figure separated from his body and appeared in front of him out of thin air. It was the deep-sea nether snake. It was almost natural for girls to be afraid of snakes. As soon as they saw the deep-sea nether snake appear, whether it was the strong Riwa, Ming Ming, or Modi, they all let out a cry of surprise at the same time. However, the one with the strongest reaction was Vol. Snakes were the natural enemies of rats, and as soon as the deep-sea nether snake appeared, Vol's body immediately trembled uncontrollably, and his face turned pale. Originally, as the Zodiac guardian warrior, Vol shouldn't be so weak. However, the deep-sea nether snake was not an ordinary snake. As the king of the sea, although it wasn't in the sea and had lost the blue sea thunder pearl, it was still the overlord of snakes. The sudden release of the cold aura immediately caused Vol's natural reaction. At this time, the deep-sea nether snake's color was blue with a hint of purple. Compared to the last time Chiyu saw it at its weakest, its body was obviously bigger. It was about 1.5 meters long, and there was a small bump at the 7-inch area. Chiyu could tell at a glance. Its second head was about to grow. As long as it grew its second head, the deep-sea nether snake's strength would definitely be greatly restored. Of course, this had a lot to do with the empty shell of the blue sea thunder pearl that Chiyu had returned to it. As a Zodiac snake, Hu Guang naturally wouldn't be afraid of snakes. He said with some surprise, Brother Chiyu, why do you carry a snake with you? Your snake is really interesting. It can actually talk. The deep-sea nether snake said unhappily, I want to know what kind of snake you are. How dare you call yourself the most venomous snake in the world? Don't you know that the most venomous in this world is our sea snake clan? Its toxicity is much greater than that of land snakes. Hu Guang had always had a temper that showed no weakness. When he heard the deep-sea nether snake's words, he immediately became angry. Yes, I admit that sea snakes are very venomous. The most venomous sea snakes can even be more venomous than most land snakes, but this is not absolute. The deep-sea nether snake snorted disdainfully and said, Then what are you? A rattlesnake? Or cobra? At most, you're a king cobra. Not to mention a king cobra. Even the emperor cobra, which is known to secrete the fastest venom, can't compare to my toxicity. You are wrong, respected senior beast. Hu Guang is not a snake with eyes. Although he has eyes, and I'm almost sure that from the point of view of poison, his toxicity is stronger than yours. Master Zagru walked down the stairs slowly. With his eyesight, it was easy for him to see the identity of the deep-sea nether snake. The peaceful Buddha aura that Master Zaglu emitted made the deep-sea nether snake's aura restrain a lot. After all, it was a natural counter to the deep-sea nether snake. However, the deep-sea nether snake was not willing to lose to Master Zaglu. Ever since he became stronger, he rarely used his poison to attack. But in his mind, as a member of the sea snakes, he was definitely the most venomous snake. Well, what kind of snake do you think he is? I don't believe that he is more venomous than me. The deep-sea nether snake argued. Zagru smiled slightly and said, I wonder if you have heard of a venomous snake called the black mamba? The most knowledgeable person here was naturally Guan Ping, who was a doctor. As soon as he heard Master Zagru's words, he immediately said in surprise, Is Hu Guang a black mamba? That is a legendary venomous snake. As far as I know, the black mamba lives in Africa. It is the most venomous snake in Africa and also the largest snake in Africa. Although it is not very famous, it can be regarded as one of the most venomous land snakes in the world. Generally, its aura is found in dry areas such as open bushes and grasslands. Its body is slender, and its adult snake is generally more than 2 meters long. The longest recorded length can reach 5 meters. The most unique thing about this snake is that the inside of its mouth is black. When it opens its mouth, it can be clearly seen. The venom is a neurotoxin, and its toxicity is extremely strong. In Africa, the black mamba is the most legendary and most feared snake. Not only does it have a huge and powerful body and deadly venom, but what is more terrifying is its aggressiveness and amazing speed. When threatened, the black mamba can erect the front half of its body and open its big black mouth to launch an attack. The death rate of those who are bitten without anti-venom is infinitely close to 100%. Master Zagru smiled slightly and said, As expected of a doctor, you are right. Among all venomous snakes, including sea snakes, the black mamba is the most aggressive, and it has the fastest speed among all venomous snakes. Once its neurotoxin is injected, it can easily kill dozens of people in a minute. The deep-sea nether snake was not convinced and said, So what if he is a black mamba? Is the black mamba more venomous than me? Don't forget, we are not competing in aggressiveness and speed, but toxicity. Zagru said, In terms of toxicity alone, from the known venomous snakes, it should be the Australian split-cheeked sea snake. Senior doesn't seem to be the split-cheeked sea snake. The deep-sea nether snake said proudly, Although I am not the split-cheeked sea snake, the split-cheeked sea snake will run away immediately when it sees me. It only has neurotoxin venom, but I have neurotoxin and corrosive venom. In the sea, it can't even reach me before it is corroded by my venom. There was a hint of surprise in Zagru's eyes. It seems that the abilities of Senior and Hu Guang really have something in common. Although Hu Guang is a black mamba, he is not an ordinary black mamba, but the rarest emperor black mamba in the world. In terms of toxicity, the black mamba is a little worse than the king cobra, but its speed and aggressiveness are stronger than the king cobra. However, the emperor cobra is only better than the ordinary king cobra in terms of size, toxicity, and venom secretion speed. However, the emperor black mamba is not like this. There is a huge gap between the emperor black mamba and the ordinary black mamba. This is because the toxicity of the emperor black mamba is dual attribute. The neurotoxin venom of the emperor black mamba can be compared with that of the split-cheeked sea snake. Moreover, its corrosive venom is incomparable to any venom in the world. If Hu Guang practices to the 9 cloud level, then his corrosive venom can corrode anything in this world, including energy. This kind of corrosiveness, combined with neurotoxin venom, is indeed the strongest in the world. This time, it was the deep-sea nether snake's turn to be surprised. What? What did you say? Even energy can be corroded? Zagru said, In theory, it can corrode anything. Moreover, Hu Guang's snake venom, with the help of the ascending cloud technique, can carry out a volatile attack close to the ground. It doesn't need to see blood. As long as it comes into contact, it will be effective. Among all the Zodiac Guardian warriors, he is the only one who can use poison. Perhaps it is because the venom is too strong, but this world is fair. Therefore, he has lost many of the abilities that the other snake warriors should have. Ian said impatiently, F***CK, that's not enough? He's already invincible enough. If he has other abilities, how are we supposed to live? Zagru smiled slightly and said, I said, this world is fair. Although the venom of snakes is very strong, The situation I just mentioned can only be fully displayed after he reaches the 9 cloud level. Moreover, snakes have natural enemies. No matter how strong they are, this can't be hidden. Ian smiled and said, "Then what is the natural enemy of snakes? Is it me?" Hu Guang snorted disdainfully. "A bald monkey like you wants to be my natural enemy? Stop dreaming, let me think." As he said that, his eyes swept across the other Zodiac guardian god warriors. When his eyes fell on Ming Ming, his body suddenly trembled, and he said in a daze, "No way. How can my natural enemy be a chicken? Chickens should be the natural enemy of poisonous insects. How can it affect a great snake like me?" Zagru smiled. "That's right. A chicken can subdue a poisonous insect. But Ming Ming isn't an ordinary chicken. As a chicken warrior, her inherited bloodline will mutate when she reaches the 9 cloud level, turning into the bloodline of the phoenix. What restrains you are all kinds of giant birds, mythical beasts, and ferocious beasts. As the king of birds, isn't the phoenix the perfect counter to you? So it's normal that you can sense it." The deep-sea nether snake was speechless, and he returned to Chi Yu's side with his tail between his legs. Originally, he thought that Chi Yu was the only abnormal one, but he didn't expect that these guys in front of him were even more abnormal. Let's not talk about that wretched Zodiac snake whose toxicity was stronger than his. Just the phoenix that Grandmaster Zagru mentioned was enough to make his heart tremble. One should know that during the era of ancient behemoths, the deep-sea nether snake clan couldn't even deal with Kirin, but they were afraid of the phoenix that naturally restrained them. He also knew the relationship between this girl, named Ming Ming, and Chi Yu, and he would only humiliate himself if he continued to speak. With a flash of light, the deep-sea nether snake returned to Chi Yu's side. Chi Yu said, "Since Big Brother Hu Guang has such a strong toxicity, then our operation this time will be much easier to succeed. Things have been clarified. This time, the Westerners and the scum of the Sun Nation came to Yin Huang for something called the Sacred Source." At that moment, he explained everything that he and Ruyue had heard from Lu Yuan in detail, including some of his and Ruyue's deductions. An absorbable energy that can move. Why does it feel so strange? Zagru fell into deep thought. Ian said, "Why don't we send some of our men over? Although our influence in Yunnan isn't very strong, we should be of some use." He seemed a little hesitant when he said this. Chi Yu shook his head and said, "Let's not. I heard from Ruyue that the Sacred Flame sect's main influence is in the north. It's not good to cross the border. Although you guys are also the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors, I think it's better not to affect your organization, lest those who oppose you talk behind your back." Hu Guang nodded and said, "We're all brothers, so I won't stand on ceremony. The South is indeed not our territory. Moreover, those fellows in the South are keeping a close eye on our Sacred Flame sect. If there's no need, it's better not to have any conflict. It's not that we're afraid of them, but the situation now is already very delicate. It's not good to have any sudden changes." Chi Yu's gaze fell on Guan Ping. Guan Ping smiled and shook his head. He said, "It's fine for me to do research, but I only want to participate in this kind of operation. It's better for you guys to make the big decisions." Modi nodded and said, "That's what I mean too. I joined the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors because of the ability I inherited and also because I hope to contribute to our country. It doesn't matter to me what form it takes. Now I feel that being able to become a Zodiac Guardian God Warrior is a very honorable thing, especially after we defeated those vampires last time. It made me feel that my ability wasn't wasted. I used it in the right place." Bull said, "Boss, I don't need that. I'll listen to everything you say." Yin Xiaoi said disdainfully, "Follow my ass. F***CK. Then tell me what you've noticed." "Impotence." Vol retorted, not showing any weakness. Yin Xiaoi saw that everyone's gaze fell on him and said awkwardly, "About this, I think. Forget it. I'll listen to boss. Boss, I'll kill wherever you point me to." Vol made a disdainful gesture. Without saying anything, his disdainful gaze had already made Yin Xiaoi very unhappy. Ming Ming said, "I feel that our operation this time must be safety first. Chi Yu, you said just now that the Vatican would rather destroy the sacred origin than let the Covenant of Darkness get it. Perhaps what they said wasn't their real intention, but I feel that this rule applies to us. After all, our own forces are still relatively weak. Once we face all the Western experts, I'm afraid it will be very difficult to resist. Since the sacred origin is in our Yin Huang Republic, we can't let any of the West get it. Not even the Vatican or the Greek guardians. If there's no other choice, we can only destroy it. After listening to Ming Ming's words, everyone nodded. At this time, Zagru, who was in deep thought, suddenly exclaimed, I understand this sacred origin is probably a living thing. Chiyu was stunned and said, A living thing? What do you mean, Grandmaster? Zagru said, I've thought about it carefully just now. That paladin called Lu Yuan really did hide something from you. If what he said is true, then such a huge amount of compressed energy can't be easily moved. Even if it moves, there will definitely be signs, and it won't completely disappear. Therefore, there's only one possibility, and that is that the energy they call the sacred origin is alive. Only in this way, in order to avoid being hunted down by others, will it hide its aura. Every year, at a certain time, when it can no longer hide its energy, it will once again reveal itself. And Dali and Yunnan should be a place where it must go. There might be something it needs there, or a place it must go. Chiyu nodded and said, What Grandmaster said makes sense. So, Grandmaster, do you know of any ancient mythological beasts that are in such a situation? Zagru shook his head and said, I've roughly thought about it. Among the ancient mythological beasts and ancient ferocious beasts that I know, there is absolutely no such situation. Although the ancient giant beasts have very strong energy, the situation where it can be absorbed is unique. Let me ask you, who would be willing to use the energy that they have painstakingly cultivated for others? Chiyu, why don't you ask the elder nether snake again? With his lifespan of close to 10,000 years, maybe he will know more. Chiyu thought about it and said, Forget about him. After all, he has always lived in the sea and may not know much about the situation on land. It's better to ask another one. As he spoke, the thundercloud force in his body operated, and his spiritual force communicated with another soul hidden in his body. Brother Xieji, please come out. I have something to ask you. Under the influence of spiritual force, Xieji was awakened from its deep sleep by Chiyu. Through spiritual communication, Chiyu asked him to release his voice so that everyone present could hear it. After a brief understanding of the situation, Xieji thought for a long time and said, I don't seem to have any impression of the situation. This little monk is right. In the era of the ancient giant beasts, although there were many strong people with powerful energy who would be willing to make a wedding dress for others. Chiyu frowned and said, Brother Xieji, think about it again. This is very important for us. Xieji thought for a moment and said, No, I can be sure that there is no one. Although I'm not completely clear about the beast system, I know most of it. Not to mention the mythological beasts. My memory is still very good, but I have no clue at all. There is no ancient giant beast whose energy is completely absorbable. Chiyu looked at Zagru and said, Master, in addition to the ancient giant beasts, is it possible for other creatures to have huge energy, or a dual attribute of light and fire? Zagru smiled bitterly and said, I am even more unclear about this. From the perspective of being able to attract the Western powers, the energy of the sacred origin must be very huge. Otherwise, it would not be coveted by so many people. In this case, ordinary creatures can be completely ruled out. Chiyu's eyes suddenly lit up and said, Is it possible that when an ancient beast body or an ancient giant beast body has undergone a mutation, its energy has undergone a huge change and become absorbable? Zagru looked at Chiyu in surprise and said, This is not impossible. Chiyu, although your idea is very bold, I think it should be possible. Xieji said, Well, yes, in my memory, in the ancient giant beast period, whether it is a mythological beast or a ferocious beast, there have been cases of mutation. Although this situation is rare, it is not unheard of. It is just that I have never encountered one that can be completely absorbed. It is better for you to see for yourself. Since the energy does exist, Even if you can't completely determine its position when the energy is emitted like the Western Pope, with your own strength, after a certain distance, you should be able to react. When sensing, it is best to use the opposite ability to detect. The effect will be better. For example, Chi use water thundercloud force. Well, that is all I know. Sleep, sleep. Brother Xieji, you sleep every day. Don't you feel bored? Chi Yu is somewhat speechless. Xieji said, what do I do if I don't sleep? I have lived for more than 3,000 years, and most of my time was spent in cultivation. Now that I don't need to cultivate anymore, I naturally have to make up for the rest time that I should have in the past 3,000 years. Also, I am constantly thinking during the process of sleeping. Also, you are too bold. If you play that kind of cultivation again, I am afraid that your potential will be drained. At that time, you will not be able to advance to a higher level in the future. Even if you want to cry, you won't be able to. Chi Yu smiled apologetically and said, okay, you go to sleep. I will be careful. Xieji went back to sleep, and Chi Yu said to everyone, I think everyone can't think of any good ideas now. After all, we still don't know what the sacred source is. We can only go to Dali first and think about it. Ryue, book the plane tickets for everyone. Even if it's not fast, it's still good. We don't have much time left. Every minute we practice is a little more for our lives. For us, the Zodiac Guardian Warriors, the speed of continuous improvement of our ability is incomparable to those Westerners. So, in order to better protect yourselves and your companions, everyone must take time to cultivate. No one would refute Chi Yu's words. After the battle with the Covenant of Darkness, the relationship between the Zodiac Guardian Warriors had become more harmonious than before. Especially Chi Yu's heroic performance at that time. It had once again won their recognition. After all, when needed, Chi Yu was always the first to rush to the front, using all his ability and even his life to protect his companions. Everyone went back to their rooms to cultivate. Only Chi Yu and Zagru stayed in the hall. Chi Yu, you have a good expression. It seems that God's choice will not be wrong. Now I still remember the time after we first met, at Ba. To be honest, I was even angry at you at that time. Chi Yu awkwardly scratched his head and said, Great master, I'm just a ruffian. However, to be able to make a senior monk like you, who has inherited the power of Buddhism for 10 lifetimes, feel anger towards me, my skill is also very high. Master Zagru looked at the guy in front of him who did not feel ashamed and instead felt proud. He smiled bitterly and said, What kind of eminent monk am I? Although I have practiced Buddhism since I was young, compared to my predecessors, I am still too far behind. Chi Yu, the most important thing now is to solve the problem of the sacred source. At the same time, you also have to pay more attention. You now have the strength of the 4 clouds, and Kirin's aura can already detect the Zodiac Guardian Warriors on a large scale. You have also seen how many dangers we are facing now. Only by gathering all the Zodiac Guardian Warriors as soon as possible can we better face everything. As the king of the Zodiac, you will be able to better display your strength. Chi Yu said, Master, can you tell me what kind of abilities I will have after gathering all the Zodiac Guardian Warriors? Zagru smiled and said, I will teach you by example, but it is better for you to experience it yourself. Don't worry, you will naturally understand when the time comes. This time, when we go to Yunnan, you only need to pay attention to my abilities. It should give you some inspiration. You must remember, sometimes the one in charge of support is often the most important. This is the true meaning of Kirin as the king of the Zodiac. Chi Yu's eyes revealed a light of contemplation. Zagru continued helplessly. However, I have to admit that you are different. When I first found out that you were Kirin of the 4 auspicious clouds, I did not have much hope for you. In my opinion, every cloud you cultivate is more difficult than reaching the heavens. However, you have shown me a miracle. In just half a year, you have actually rushed to the 4th cloud level. This is a realm that none of the previous Kirin warriors could reach in their lifetime. Kirin of the 4 auspicious clouds has reached the 4th cloud level, and his strength is very terrifying. Therefore, I dare not say whether your ability to support the Zodiac Guardian Warriors in the future will be stronger, or your own strength will be more helpful to everyone. Chapter 85. Zagru said, "What Ming Ming said just now is very true. For this mission, we would rather destroy the sacred source as a last resort. This last resort is not only about being forced into a desperate situation, but it can also be explained as a last resort when any of the Zodiac Guardian warriors are in danger. After all, there are only 13 of you, and none of you can be lost. As the king of the Zodiac, you must bear this in mind. Of course, protecting yourself is also the most important thing." Chiyu said with a straight face, "Master, don't worry. This time, however many of us go, we will definitely come back. Even if the worst-case scenario is for the Westerners to get their hands on the sacred source, compared to the sacred source, any of our brothers and sisters are much more important. I won't lead everyone to fight to the death. We're just looking for opportunities to disrupt the Westerners and the Sun Nation's plans." Zagru smiled and said, "I'm relieved that you can think this way. All right, you should go back and cultivate. I notice that you are very considerate of everyone now. Every time you cultivate, you will deliberately spread your aura throughout the entire villa to help everyone improve their thundercloud force. Chiyu, maybe you haven't noticed it yourself, but you are slowly growing." Zagru patted Chiyu's shoulder and walked upstairs with a smile. Chiyu looked at his back as he left and said to himself helplessly, "This guy, Ming Ming, is not even as old as I am. He is always acting like an elder. No wonder he has the power of Buddha from 10 lives." The next morning, when all the Zodiac Guardian warriors arrived at the capital airport, Lu Yuan was already waiting there. He didn't even have any luggage with him, just a simple cultivator's outfit. He looked like he was traveling to Yunnan. "Mr. Qi, you are here." Lu Yuan's gaze swept across the crowd and finally landed on Vol and Master Zaglu, whom he had never met before. He even saw Yin Xiaoi at the gay bar last time, but it was the first time that Vol and Zagru met each other. When his gaze passed by the Vol, it only paused for a moment, but when he saw Master Zagru, his gaze clearly froze, followed by a very surprised look. "Mr. Qi, who is this?" Lu Yuan asked Chiyu. Chiyu said, "This is one of our partners. You even met the door. You can call him Zagru. Because he's an ethnic minority, his name is a little strange." Lu Yuan nodded and took the initiative to walk up to Zagru. "Hello, I'm Lu Yuan from the Vatican." As he spoke, he extended his right hand to Zagru. Zaglu smiled and shook his hand, saying, "Hello, I'm Zaglu." In order to not be recognized, Zaglu smiled. In order not to be recognized, Zagru's attire was a little strange today. He wore Sudong's casual clothes and a baseball cap to cover his bald head. Lu Yuan's eyes flashed. "I don't know why. Although today is the first time we meet, I have a very strange sense of intimacy towards Mr. Zagru. I've only felt this feeling from the Pope." Hearing Lu Yuan call him Mr. Zagru, Yin Xiaoi, who was drinking soy milk at the side, almost spat it out. Even though he tried to hold it in, he still couldn't help but cough violently. The other Zodiac Guardian God warriors beside him also couldn't help but smile. Lu Yuan was a little stunned. "Did I say something wrong? I've carefully studied the etiquette of Yin Huang, and there doesn't seem to be anything wrong." Chiyu held back his laughter and said, "No, you didn't say anything wrong. You've already done very well. This Mr. Zagru is the youngest capable person in our Eastern Guardian. In the future, you guys can get to know each other better." Lu Yuan nodded and smiled. "That's for sure. Everyone, let's go get our boarding passes first. Then we can continue talking inside." Everyone queued up to get their boarding passes. At this moment, while they were waiting for the plane, Jita had already left the capital on the previous flight. He had gone to Dali before them. Yesterday, Chiyu had spoken to Jita on the phone before training. After a discussion, Jita decided to go to Yunnan first. Not only that, but he also wanted to familiarize himself with his new subordinates. That way, he could display his effectiveness in this operation. To Chiyu, sitting on a plane was originally a very painful thing. However, the situation this time was much better. On his left sat Ryue, and on his right sat Ming Ming. With two beauties accompanying him and other companions around him, he also had the ability to fly. His fear of heights was not as obvious as before. Lu Yuan sat in front of Chiyu together with Grandmaster Zagru. He was obviously very interested in Zagru. From Zagru's holy aura, he did not feel any strong energy fluctuations. However, the feeling that Zagru gave him was too special. Just as he had said, the feeling that Zagru gave him was something that had only appeared on the Pope before. The other Zodiac Guardian warriors followed Chi Yu's advice last night. They closed their eyes and entered a semi-meditative state of training. So did Ryue. Of course, she did not really cultivate. She was always paying attention to Chi Yu's fear of heights. He did not show it because he was in front of Ming Ming. Ming Ming obviously did not have the same scruples as Ryue. The first time Chi Yu took a plane, he was with her. Now that he had another chance, Chi Yu naturally held Ming Ming's hand tightly. His body leaned on Ming Ming, and he felt indescribably comfortable. Amidst the rumbling of the engine, the passenger plane from Southeast Airlines successfully took off from Beijing Airport and flew in the direction of Yunnan. After a short period of nervousness, Chi Yu found that he was not as afraid of flying as before. He could not help but feel relieved. Of course, his actions would not change. Leaning on Ming Ming's elastic body, he smelled her alluring fragrance. It was definitely a very enjoyable thing. Soon, the plane entered a stable taxiing state. Through the side window, they could see the bright and somewhat dazzling sunlight outside. Under such good weather, it would take about 4 hours to reach Yunnan. Unconsciously, Chi Yu also gradually entered a state of training. Because Lu Yuan was in front of him, he did not show his Kirin aura too obviously. He just held Ming Ming's hand and communicated with his Kirin energy with Ming Ming. He helped Ming Ming stabilize her thundercloud force that had just been upgraded to 5 clouds. At the same time, the two of them were also improving their thundercloud force. After entering 4 clouds, the thundercloud force was purer and more condensed than the thundercloud force at 3 clouds. If the thundercloud force at 1 cloud was Qi, then the performance of 2 clouds in the body would be like clouds. The second cloud would be like a cloud in his body, and the third cloud would be like water vapor. Now, the 4th cloud would be like water. This was just a metaphor used to describe the purity of the cloud power. In fact, when Chi circulated the cloud power in his body, he realized that the cloud power in his body had turned into a liquid state like water. The circulation speed was much slower than before, but of course, the cloud power did not really turn into water. Thundercloud force would never become liquid. Thundercloud force was thundercloud force. They would always be the same. The only difference was the degree of combination between the energy molecules of thundercloud force. When thundercloud force entered 4 clouds, they looked like liquid. When Chi Yu entered 4 clouds, his thundercloud force was twice as strong as that of 3 clouds. However, his thundercloud force of thunder attribute and thundercloud force of water attribute had been automatically upgraded to 5 clouds. Only his thundercloud force of wind attribute and fire attribute needed to be cultivated. Therefore, if he only used the thundercloud force of thunder attribute or fire attribute, he could be on par with Hai Ryue. If he used 4 clouds at the same time, his power would be unknown. Chi Yu slowly activated his own thundercloud force. Although it took him more time to run 1 cloud circle than before, after 9 small cloud circles, Chi Yu felt that his body was more comfortable than running 1 cloud circle. The purple, blue, red, and cyan cloud lines intertwined in his 8 meridians. Every time he reached an acupoint, he could gather more thundercloud force. However, only the fire thundercloud force and the wind thundercloud force increased, because the other 2 thundercloud force had been saturated. Before Chi Yu reached the 5 clouds realm, his acupoints could not gather and absorb external energy molecules. Chi Yu did not practice Kirin's ascending to cloud technique this time. Instead, he practiced Kirin's skill. For him, the most important thing now was to recover his potential. Even if Kirin's ascending to cloud technique did not completely absorb the thundercloud force, it would consume his potential quickly. However, Kirin's skill was different. Although it was slower, it had a certain effect on recovering his potential. Moreover, Chi Yu had tried it and found that Kirin's skill and Kirin's ascending to cloud technique did not conflict with each other. Kieran's ascending to cloud technique was originally derived from Kieran's skill. Using Kieran's skill and Kieran's skill alternately to practice Kieran's skill was much faster than using only one practice method. When Chiyu practiced with Kieran's tactics, he did not separate his spiritual force from his close friends. It was not that he could not separate his spiritual force with Kieran's tactics, but he did not think it was necessary. He did not need to worry about any danger when he sat with others on the plane. Moreover, the Kieran's tactics did not require special control like Kieran's ascending cloudgram method. After another night's rest, Chiyu's physical condition had recovered to 80%. Although he was not in the best state, he could deal with anything. Time always passed quickly in the process of practicing. When Chiyu felt weightless, the plane had already landed in Kunming Airport, the capital of Yunnan province. To go to Dali, they had to pass through Kunming and transfer from there. Although they had prepared for it, when they arrived in Kunming, Chiyu and some of the Zodiac guardian god warriors who did not come to the south of China were still shocked. The temperature here was at least 20 degrees lower than that in the capital. The warm weather was only suitable for wearing unlined clothes. Everyone ran to the airport's restroom to change clothes. When the plane arrived in Kunming, it was already afternoon. Dali was originally a tourist destination. In history, it was the capital of the Dali kingdom. The ancient city of Dali faced the rippling Irai Lake in the east and the evergreen Tsang Mountain in the west. This time, they were going to get Chongshan Temple, one of the three major temples in Dali. Hai Ryue made a phone call, and 2 cars arrived in a short while. She had a branch office in Yunnan, so it was easy for her to get 2 cars. Chiyu, Ming, and Hai Ryue were in the same car. Together with Master Zuru, Vol, Modi, and Lu Yuan, there were 7 of them. Su Dong, Yin, Hu Guang, Guan Ping, and Yin Xiaoi were in the same car. The 2 cars were very big. Both of them were standard Buick MPV business class with 3 rows of seats. It was really comfortable to sit in an American car. The drivers were arranged by Ryue in advance. Dali Chongqing Temple was one of the famous tourist attractions in Yunnan. Since they were here, their goal was naturally to go to the vicinity of Chongshan Temple. After they settled down, they would decide what to do according to the situation. Chiyu almost called Master, but he suddenly remembered that Lu Yuan was there, so he quickly changed his words. Master, oh, Mr. Jia, do you know anything about Chongqing Temple? Zhag Lu smiled faintly and said, I know a little, but it's only on the surface. Chongqing Temple was located about 1 kilometer north of Dali. The snow-capped mountains, the silver-carved Diansong Mountain, stood behind, and the billowing Arai Lake was embedded in front of it. The 3 pagodas stood like a tripod, supporting the sky and the earth. The jade pillar marked the sky, majestic and magnificent. It was one of the scenic spots in Tsang Arai. According to historical records, such as Unofficial History of Nanzhao and General Strategy of Ancient Times, the holy monk Li Chengmei built 3 pagodas, 890 houses, 11,400 Buddhas, and 40,590 kilograms of copper. The pagodas were built from the 10th ruler of Nanzhao, Fengyu, from the 10th year of Baohe to the 1st year of Tianqi, which was 834 to 840 years of AD. The construction cost 70,800 people, gold, silver, silk, and brocade, which was worth 43,514 kilograms of gold. Lu Yuan said in surprise, Mr. Jia, I didn't expect you to know so much about Chongshan Temple. You even remember the data so clearly. Zagru smiled and said, These are the treasures of Yanhuang. As a descendant of Yanhuang, these are our pride. However, compared to Chongshan Temple, the 3 pagodas of Dali are more famous. 3 pagodas? Chiyu's heart skipped a beat. Zagru nodded and said, The 3 pagodas of Dali are built in Chongqing Temple. They are known as the 3 pagodas and Buddha's secret craftsmanship. The main pagoda of the 3 pagodas is called Qian Sun Pagoda. It is 13 meters tall, and is a square 16-story pagoda. It is a typical building of the Tang dynasty, along with the big and small wild goose pagodas in Xi'an. Looking up from the bottom of the pagoda, one could see the pagoda reaching the clouds. The pagoda was stationary and looked like it was going to collapse. The base of the pagoda was square and divided into two levels. The lower level was 33.5 meters long and was surrounded by stone railings. The pillars at the four corners of the railings were carved with stone lions. The upper level was 21 meters long, and in the middle of the east was a stone wall. On it, there were four big words inscribed by Mu Shiji, the descendant of the Duke of Guizhou, forever guarding the mountains and rivers. The first level of the pagoda was 13.5 meters high. It was the highest level in the entire pagoda. The east door was 2 meters away from the base, while the west door was 6 meters away. The pagoda wall was 3.5 meters thick. The second to the 15th levels were basically the same, and their sizes were similar. The 16th level was the top of the pagoda. Taking the second level as an example, it was about 2 meters high and 10 meters wide. The upper level was built with overlapping eaves. There were 17 layers of bricks, and each layer was 0.05 to 0.07 meters high. The four corners of the eaves were tilted upwards. There were Buddhist shrines in the middle of the east and west sides of the pagoda. There was a statue of Buddha inside. On both sides of the shrine, there was a small pavilion shrine with a lotus seat and a hall-like roof. There was a piece of Sanskrit inlaid in the middle. On the north and south sides, there was a coupon-shaped window in the middle that led straight to the center of the pagoda. On the third level, there were Buddhist shrines on the north and south sides and windows on the east and west sides. The pagoda shrunk the higher it went. The top of the pagoda was 8 meters high, which was about 1/7 of the pagoda. The tall and straight pagoda gave people a feeling that it was out of this world and pierced through the clouds. At the top of the pagoda was a bronze gourd-shaped vase. At the bottom of the vase was an octagonal lid with wings spread out at the four corners. There was a wind-striking blade. At the bottom of the vase was a steel frame and copper skin. At the bottom was an alms bowl with a lotus seat. At the four corners of the pagoda, there were originally golden rocks. It was said that dragons respected the pagoda, but feared the rocks. Dali used to be the dragon swamp, so it was used to guard it. Now, the golden rocks were no more. Before the restoration, only the feet of the golden rocks remained. The Chin Sun pagoda was hollow. There was a simple wooden ladder that led to the top of the pagoda. On the west side of the Chin Sun pagoda, about 70 meters apart, there were two small pagoda in the north and south. They were octagonal and 10 levels of brick pagoda with secret eaves. Each of them was 42 and 19 meters tall. There were Buddhist statues, lotus flowers, vases, and other reliefs on the pagoda. The first to 8th levels were hollow and straight with a cross inside. The base of the pagoda was also octagonal. The distance between the two pagodas was 97 meters. The three pagodas formed a tripod. The layout was consistent, and the shape was harmonious. When talking about this sacred land of Buddhism, it was as if he was familiar with it. Not only was Lu Yuan dumbfounded, but even Qi Yu and the other Zodiac guardian warriors couldn't help but admire him. As expected of an eminent monk. That's all I know. This is what I've read about it. As for the specific details, I'm not very clear. Zagru smiled modestly. Lu Yuan smiled bitterly. Isn't it clear enough? Mr. Qi, I'm starting to feel that it's a very wise decision to cooperate with you. After all, this is your place. Qi Yu had a different feeling. He could faintly feel that Sheng Yuan being near the Chongshan temple was very beneficial to them. Who knew what was so special about this ancient temple? Although Zagru didn't explicitly say anything, it was obvious that he had a deep understanding of this place. Maybe he could bring him some surprises. The two business-class cars drove very fast. When they entered the territory of Dali, everyone was immediately stunned by the beautiful scenery in front of them. From afar, they could already see the Tsang Mountain. The Tsang Mountain had two colors. The lower part of the mountain was covered with a variety of coniferous forests. It was dark green, and the upper part was completely covered with snow. The sky in Dali was much clearer than in the city. The sapphire sky was dotted with white clouds. The clean and clear feeling made people feel relaxed and happy. In front of the magnificent Tsang Mountain, there was a large and unusually clear lake. Needless to say, this was the Arai Lake that Zagru mentioned. The snowy mountains and clear water were the ultimate scenery. Between the Tsang Mountain and the Arai Lake, there were 3 towering white pagodas, 1 big and 2 small. The pagodas were reflected in the Arai Lake. The strange feeling made everyone's heart feel special. Ming Ming exclaimed, "It's really beautiful here. It's like a paradise." Ryua nodded and said, "Being here, it's like my heart has been cleansed. I used to be too busy with work. I didn't expect our motherland to have such a beautiful place." Lu Yuan agreed. "This is definitely one of the most beautiful places in the world. I've never seen such a scenery. The snowy mountains and clear water are actually connected, and the 3 white pagodas are like a bridge." Zagru smiled and said, "Those 3 pagodas should be the 3 pagodas of Dali in the Chongshan Temple. It's a pity that the Chongshan Temple was destroyed a lot. Otherwise, this place would have become more beautiful." Ryue said, "Let's stay in the city first. Anyway, the distance between the Supreme Court and the Chongshan Temple is only about a kilometer." Chiyu stared out of the window without saying a word. He was also greatly shocked. At the same time, he also faintly felt the existence of several powerful energies. Perhaps because these energies were too powerful, the other Zodiac Guardian warriors did not feel the same as him. But Chiyu knew that Zagru must have felt what he felt. When the Tsang Mountain of Arai appeared, Zagru's temperament seemed to have completely changed, as if he had integrated with the snowy mountains and clear water in front of him. This should be the realm of the oneness of heaven and man. In this case, what could be hidden from his perception? Under Ryue's command, the 2 business-class cars directly drove into the city. Everyone gradually stopped admiring the beautiful scenery. Lu Yuan quietly made 2 phone calls and said something in a foreign language. Although Chi Yu did not understand, he knew that Lu Yuan was contacting the people of the Vatican. After hanging up, Lu Yuan turned to Chi Yu and said, "Mr. Chi, our men are in Dali City. However, the people from the Covenant of Darkness have already arrived. As for the Greek protectors, they have yet to discover them. You are right. This time, the Sun Nation has also sent people, but those clowns are nothing to us." A cold light flashed in Chi Yu's eyes and said, "We can't underestimate any enemy. It's better for us to be careful. Since your people have arrived, have you found the specific location of the sacred source?" Lu Yuan nodded and said, "I can't tell the specific location, but I'm sure of its general location. It's just that the energy fluctuations of the sacred source are a little unstable these few days. They come and go, so I can't be sure. When we arrive, we can start looking for it. At least, we can find it before the people of the Covenant of Darkness." At the mention of the Covenant of Darkness, Chi Yu could not help but think of Su Qing. He did not know how she was now. If what Vampire Prince Klinsman said was true, she should have fused with the red gold primordial blood. What would Su Qing look like after turning into a vampire? He hoped that her mind would not fall into darkness. At the thought of Su Qing, Chi Yu's heart could not help but sink. As long as there was a chance, he would do his best to rescue Su Qing. After entering Dali City, everyone immediately checked into the hotel that Hai Ryue had arranged. Although Dali was a tourist attraction, it was still a remote place, so there were not many high-end hotels. The place that Hai Ryue had arranged was considered clean. Chi Yu and Su Dong shared a room, while Ryue and Ming Ming shared a room. Other than Modi, who had a room alone, the rest of the people were arranged in pairs. Of course, the clowns Guang and Ian also shared a room. After everyone had settled down, Li Yuan said goodbye to Chi Yu and left quietly. Chi Yu did not stop him, nor did he ask him anything. At this time, both sides needed to make use of each other, so Chi Yu was not afraid of him playing tricks. As soon as Li Yuan left, Chi Yu immediately made 2 phone calls before returning to his room. If it was an ordinary person, they would definitely be tired after a day of traveling, but it was nothing for the Zodiac Guardian God warriors. Everyone's nervous mood had relaxed a lot because of the beautiful scenery. They each adjusted their state of mind in their room. They all knew that it would not be long before the real battle began. As soon as Chi Yu returned to his room, the Sarira bead on his wrist emitted a warm stream of air, and his spiritual force moved slightly. Chi returned to the door and opened it. Zagru stood outside the door and nodded. Chi hurriedly let him in. You also felt it, right? Zagru said calmly. Chi nodded slightly and said, Yes, those auras are very strong, but I can't determine which one belongs to the sacred source. Zagru said, It seems that we will have to face another force this time. My Buddha Chi can clearly sense the existence of two fierce beasts here. They seem to be guarding something, but they are also afraid of something. Perhaps it has something to do with the sacred source. We must be careful when we move. These fierce beasts are definitely not any weaker than the Covenant of Darkness. One of them even has the strength of a 10,000-year fierce beast. That is not easy to deal with. 10,000-year fierce beast? After hearing Zagru's words, Chiyu and Su Dong could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Although they had never really faced a 10,000-year fierce beast, they could imagine how terrifying it was from their encounter with the deep-sea nether snake. Although the power of the deep-sea nether serpent with more than 9,900 years of cultivation was already very terrifying, the strength of a 10,000-year beast was much stronger, even though there was only a 1-year difference. During the era of the ancient giant beasts, even the King Kirin would find it difficult to deal with a 10,000-year fierce beast, let alone the Zodiac guardian warriors whose strength was not even at the 6 clouds level. The fierce beasts had always been the Zodiac guardian warriors' mortal enemies. If they really encountered one, the situation would be very unpredictable. The existence of a 10,000-year fierce beast made the whole situation even more complicated. Chi fell into deep thought. His brain was working quickly to think of a way to deal with it. Zagru said, You don't have to worry too much. We will temporarily bide our time and see how the Covenant of Darkness, the Vatican, and the Greek guardians react. If those two fierce beasts are really related to the sacred source, then they will definitely not sit by and watch anyone covet the sacred source. Therefore, we can't be too aggressive right now. Chiyu smiled. Master, is this considered killing with a borrowed knife? Zagru's face stiffened. Ba. Chiyu, can't you stop provoking me? Chiyu said calmly, I am also training your Buddhist heart. It should be good for you. Zagru really couldn't do anything to him. He smiled bitterly and said, I feel that one of the two fierce beasts is in Arai, and the other is in the Tsang Mountains. I don't know what it is exactly. The fierce beasts in the sea have more than 6,000 years of cultivation, and the ones in the mountains are the king fierce beasts, which are at the 10,000-year level. Lu Yuan didn't lie to us just now. The so-called sacred source should be near Chongming Temple, and its aura is very unstable. Its energy is always lingering around Chongming Temple, so it won't be difficult to find it. But we can't be too hasty now. Chiyu thought for a moment and said, Let's eat first. The Vatican and the Dark Parliament are confronting each other, so they won't make a move easily. Since everyone is waiting for an opportunity, we might as well relax a little and gain the upper hand by striking later. Su Dong smiled and said, Chiyu, you also know how to use tactics now. Not bad. Chiyu unhappily replied, Although I haven't studied much, I've read quite a lot of novels. How can I not understand this little bit of strategy? Furthermore, it's not just a competition of strength. Luck is equally important. When it comes to luck, do you think anyone can compare with me, the auspicious sign? Although his words sounded a little arrogant, he was right about Kirin's auspicious sign. The auspicious sign itself was one of the abilities. Although there was a lot of uncertainty, judging from Chiyu's several narrow escapes from death and the speed at which the strength of his companions improved, his auspicious sign was indeed real. Although the food in Yunnan tasted good, most of the Zodiac guardian god warriors were northerners, so they couldn't adapt to the southern food. Of course, one person was an exception. After eating a portion of food for 10 people, the taste was not very important for instrumental music. The most important thing for him was to fill his stomach and try his best to restore his body to the best state. The sky darkened very early in Dali, perhaps because it was winter. Although the temperature here was a little lower than in Kunming, it was still much higher than in the capital. It was a very comfortable temperature. In the distance, the sun gradually set. The clean clouds in the sky were dyed golden red, setting off the snow-capped mountains, clear water, and white towers. The already beautiful scenery was even more gorgeous. Lu Yuan called Qi Yu and informed him that he had found out the whereabouts of the Covenant of Darkness. Now the people of the Vatican were on guard. He hoped that Qi Yu and the others could meet up with them as soon as they were ready. It was obviously not a wise choice to deal with the Covenant of Darkness at night. Lu Yuan said that he had already sent people to monitor the people of the Covenant of Darkness. When the sun shone on the earth tomorrow morning, they would eliminate the threat of the Covenant of Darkness. As long as this big threat was eliminated, it would be much easier to deal with the Greek Guardian. Of course, Qi Yu agreed to Lu Yuan's words. As soon as he hung up the phone, he immediately discussed with the Zodiac Guardian God warriors. After a short discussion, everyone agreed that they needed to be more proactive. After some discussion, Qi Yu decided to take advantage of the fact that they had just arrived to investigate the mysteries of the sacred source as soon as possible. Chapter 86. Qi Yu said, "Master, I understand what you mean. Although we don't know if the Covenant of Darkness and the Vatican have discovered the existence of the beasts, as long as one of them makes a move, the other won't just sit back and watch. It'll be even more interesting if those two beasts get involved. Let them fight first, then we'll be the aureole behind the mantis stalking the cicada." Su Dong said, "I'm afraid the Vatican and the Covenant of Darkness have the same idea. So, they must be very cautious. It's better for us to think more carefully." Ruyue said, "We're not afraid of waiting. There's bound to be one side that can't wait anymore. If the Covenant of Darkness doesn't make a move tonight, we can really work with the Vatican and at least deal a heavy blow to them tomorrow." Qi Yu shook his head and said, "There's no rush. Tomorrow depends on the situation. Currently, the Covenant of Darkness seems to be our biggest threat, but the more hidden they are, the more dangerous they are. I still feel that our biggest competitor should be the Greek Guardians, then the Vatican, and finally the Covenant of Darkness. As for the people from a Sun Nation, they're just small fries. It's best if they don't show up. If they do, we'll focus our strength and destroy them first." Ruyue said, "All right, we'll split into two groups for tonight's operation. Ming Ming, Qi Yu, and Su Dong. The four of us have reached the 5-cloud level. Although Qi Yu is a 4-cloud level, his overall strength is also above the 5-cloud level. We'll do the first wave of investigation. The rest of you stay here with Master. We'll keep in touch. If we encounter any problems, we'll call for help. Protecting Master is the most important. Even if we don't succeed this time, we must retreat in one piece." In terms of strength, Ryue's arrangement was very reasonable. Just when Qi Yu thought no one had any objections, Hu Guang suddenly said, "Since there's a beast in a rye, how about I put some poison in it? Even if we can't poison it to death, it's good to make it suffer. Maybe when it starts to stir up trouble, we can pray for it to disrupt the situation." Qi Yu looked at the wretched glint in his eyes and said, "Are you willing to destroy the clear waters of Arai?" This, although Hu Guang came from the underworld, it didn't mean that he didn't like beautiful things. Zagru shook his head and said, "Absolutely not. Let's not talk about how much damage your poison will cause to that ferocious beast. Just for the sake of the countless creatures in Arai, you can't do this." Hu Guang said helplessly, "Then forget it. It's just a suggestion. It seems that even if it's poisonous, we can't just expel it. I'd better go to the toilet to detoxify myself." As he spoke, he turned around and walked toward the toilet. Ian chuckled and said with a cigarette in his mouth, "I can't compare to you when it comes to shitting. It'd be best if you shit to death." Hu Guang stared at him with his small eyes and said, "That's right, you can't compare to me. Who asked me to poop Ian? Damn, can you guys not be so disgusting?" Even the usually calm Guan Ping couldn't take it anymore. Qi Yu laughed and said, "All right, since the matter has been settled, we'll start when the sky is completely dark. Vol, you and Little E stay by Master's side and take care of him." The sunset was infinitely beautiful, but it was almost dusk. The beautiful scenery of the evening did not last for too long before it quietly left and disappeared into the west. Stars could be seen clearly in the clean sky, and the temperature was obviously much lower than during the day. Yu and the other three quietly left the hotel. They were not in a hurry to find the sacred origin. Under Zagru's guidance, Yu could now distinguish the three powerful auras. He carefully used his Qilin aura to sense the direction of the sacred origin's aura. He also paid attention to the movements of the two powerful beasts and circled around them. Only then did he carefully lead the other three in the direction of the sacred origin. Although Dali had been developed for a long time, in order to better preserve the beautiful scenery, the Yanhuang Republic did not build many places that were truly man-made. Therefore, most of the places here were still in their original state, especially outside Dali, where this situation was even more obvious. Yu and the other three quietly approached Chongming Temple. They did not fly, and under Yu's lead, they approached the three pagodas from the best angle. Stop! Yu's footsteps stopped. They were now in a coniferous forest at the foot of Tsang Mountain, and the surroundings were quiet. What's wrong? Ryu asked. Yu closed his eyes and carefully sensed for a while before opening them again. A silver light flashed in his eyes, and he said, "All kinds of monsters have appeared. They really know how to pick the right time. It seems that Lu Yuan chose to come here today for a reason. I'm afraid that the sacred origin has only appeared in the past 2 days. Now, it's not just the three powerful auras. There are many messy energy auras gathering in Chongming Temple. Looks like there's going to be a good show tonight." Yu carefully identified the auras, and then led Ryu and the other two into action again. Relying on Kirin's aura's keen perception of all kinds of energy auras, he found an empty area and carefully avoided the various energy auras approaching Chongming Temple. Then, he approached the three pagodas. "Let's stop here." Yu stopped at a hill, which was about 50 meters above the ground. It was just enough for him to see the general situation inside Chongming Temple. Although it was night, the three pagodas were clearly presented in front of him under the illumination of the stars. The four of them had good eyesight, and they could clearly see the situation inside the temple. It was very quiet inside Chongming Temple, at least on the surface. No one appeared, but the complicated energy auras did not stop for even a moment. Yu simply sat on the ground and silently activated Kirin's thundercloud force. A faint layer of water thundercloud force came out of his body, and with the isolation of the water thundercloud force, he concealed the aura emitted by his body. They observed quietly. They did not have to wait for long before something happened inside Chongming Temple. A milky white light suddenly emerged from the top of Chongming Temple's three pagodas. The main pagoda, Qiansun Pagoda. The light flashed and lit up Chongming Temple. The moment the milky white light appeared, many panicked figures appeared in some of the dark corners of Chongming Temple and quickly scattered in all directions. "Sacred origin," Yu exclaimed in a low voice. He could clearly feel that the milky white energy originated from the saint's source. He did not sense the sorrowful aura that Lu Yuan had mentioned, but he could clearly see that within the milky white light emitted by the sacred origin, there was a deathly red. Compared to Lu Yuan's saint energy, this milky white energy was obviously much more massive, especially the fire attribute energy molecules, which were infinitely close to a solid state. The energy was so strong that it was close to a solid state. What kind of level was that? Yu immediately tensed up. A few muffled groans could be heard from within Chongming Temple. Clearly, someone had suffered. Suddenly, Yu realized that Chongming Temple before him seemed to have changed. It was not just a change in one corner, but the entire Chongming Temple had changed in an instant. A solemn aura emanated from every corner of Chongming Temple. It was an intimidating energy, and the majestic aura spread out like a mountain. Even though Yu and the other three were still a distance away from Chongming Temple, they could faintly feel the immense aura. It was definitely not something that a human could emit. At the top of the three pagodas, a milky white light shone at the same time. A loud and clear voice suddenly rang out. "No matter who you are, no matter where you come from, Chongming Temple is a sacred place of Buddhism, and it will not be tarnished by thieves. Leave this place immediately, or this poor monk will expel you." Umitba. The loud and clear voice sounded very deep. It did not seem as domineering as Su Dong's lion's roar, but it sounded like it came from his own mental strength. That intimidating feeling made one feel as if they could not resist it. Rua said in surprise, "The high monk of Buddhism? I wonder who he is." Chiyu smiled and said, "This is a sacred place of Buddhism. How can there not be a high monk here? What a strong Buddhist energy." However, this Buddhist energy is not as pure and peaceful as Master Zagru's. It seemed a little too domineering. Su Dong said, "Don't tell me this high monk is planning to fight against the Covenant of Darkness all by himself." Chiyu chuckled and said, "Brother Su, you're wrong. Although the people from the Covenant of Darkness are nearby, they haven't entered Chongming Temple yet. Those hiding in the shadows just now should be people from the Sun Nation's Soul Eater Hall. Moreover, even if the people from the Covenant of Darkness really came, they might not be able to get away with it. That high monk is not alone. Don't forget that this is the sacred place of Buddhism, Chongming Temple. An ancient temple that has existed for thousands of years naturally has its own special features." At this moment, Chiyu is even more certain of the feeling he had when he first saw the 3 pagodas. Chongming Temple was indeed not an ordinary place. Under the influence of the coercion, the Sarara bead on Chiyu's wrist emitted a layer of warm light, and the Buddhist energy fluctuated violently. At this moment, Zagru, who was in the hotel, also sensed it at the same time. He woke up from his meditative state and muttered to himself, "Buddhism is of the same origin. We are one family." The black shadows that had scattered in fear only retreated slightly in the face of the tremendous coercion, but they immediately rushed in a Chongming temple against the strong coercion. Buddha is merciful and saves all living beings. Lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha immediately. A loud Buddhist chant rang out again, and the top of the 3 pagodas suddenly shone brightly. The white light that was filled with Buddhist energy completely illuminated the entire Chongming temple, and the black shadows had nowhere to hide. Chiyu could clearly see an old monk in white standing in front of Qian Sun Pagoda. Monks did not need to grow a beard, but from the wrinkles on his face, one could tell that he was very old. The old monk stood there like a towering mountain. Even a majestic Song Mountain could not conceal his majestic aura. Standing in front of the 1,000-seeker pagoda, his palms were placed together and his eyebrows were lowered. He looked like a towering pine tree. The black shadows quickly approached the old monk from different angles. The long blades in the air carried a lightning-like light, but compared to lightning, these lights were much more sinister. Chiyu's judgment was correct. These people were from the Sun Nation's Soul Devourer Hall. They were also the first to move out of the various forces. The old monk did not move, still maintaining his original posture. Chiyu and the other 3 noticed that as the black shadows pounced on the old monk, their bodies were emitting a thick black aura. However, when the black aura came into contact with the Buddhist light of the 3 pagodas, it immediately melted like ice and snow. From low to high, the Soul Devourer Hall was divided into 5 ranks: Hunter, Shadow, Assassin, Dark, and Stream. There were more than 20 people in front of them, and the ones charging at the front were at least Assassin and Shadow-level Soul Devourers. However, under the influence of the Buddhist light, their speed was significantly reduced. The standard samurai swords of the Sun Nation were completely black. However, they were not supposed to reflect light, but for some reason, they were emitting a strange glow under the Buddhist light. Right at the front, the 6 Soul Devourers rushed to the front of the old monk. 6 long swords headed straight for the old monk's bald head with 9 ring scars. The angle of the swords was extremely tricky, almost sealing off all the areas where the old monk could dodge. However, would the old monk dodge? No, he had no intention of dodging from the beginning. Just when the 6 long blades were about a foot away from his head, a golden light burst out instantly. The light suddenly lit up, and the 6 Soul Devourers screamed at the same time, their bodies flying backward. On the surface, their bodies did not seem to be injured at all. However, A layer of golden light surrounded their bodies that were originally emitting a faint black aura. The Buddha's Dharma is boundless. Repent, and you will be saved. As long as you know you are wrong, then it is not too late. There is still a chance. Chi-Yu exclaimed, "What a strong Buddhist force. He actually crippled 6 people in an instant." Ryues said, "This old monk's murderous nature is so strong." Chi-Yu shook his head and said, "No, he had no intention of killing from the beginning to the end. The knowledge of the 6 soul devourers has been crippled by him. Let me ask, if these guys who live in the dark were baptized by Buddhist energy, what would be the effect?" Su Dong's eyes widened, and he said, "Damn, then wouldn't their evil abilities be like the father of a gorilla, crippled baboon?" Chi-Yu sneered. "I really don't know what those people from the Soul Devourer Hall are thinking. Their evil abilities are most afraid of pure Buddhist energy. Since they discovered that the sacred source appeared in a Buddhist holy land like the Chongshan Temple, they actually dared to come here and throw away their lives. They must have water in their heads." The Sun Nation Soul Devourers reacted immediately after the first attack failed. The Soul Devourers that were charging forward all stopped in midair and then quickly retreated out of the temple. The old monk clearly had no intention of giving chase. He just softly chanted a Buddhist mantra, turned around, and walked toward Chien Sun Pagoda. Chi-Yu narrowed his eyes and said with a low laugh, "Those guys are afraid, and the people of the Covenant of Darkness are also waiting outside, not daring to enter." Ming Ming said, "They're just unlucky. This Buddhist light is much more powerful than sunlight. Even a high-level vampire would be greatly weakened if bathed in this Buddhist light." Chi-Yu's eyes flashed, and he smiled. "All right, since they don't dare to enter, let's go in." Ryue, Su Dong, and Ming Ming looked at him in surprise. Chi-Yu said, "Let's go. There's nothing to be surprised about. This is called luring the snake out of its hole. I don't believe that those guys aren't afraid of us getting the sacred source first." Ryu said worriedly, "But in this way, we will become the target of public criticism." Chi-Yu shook his head and said, "If it's just us, of course it won't work, but don't forget, this is Chongshan Temple. If I'm not wrong, the people of the Vatican are also nearby. It's just that they're better at hiding their auras. Looking at the current situation, we have an advantage that the other forces don't have. That is, we belong to Yin Huang, and we're the Easter protectors of Yin Huang. Moreover, we have Master's Agru. With this advantage, the relationship between us and that old monk will only be positive. That old monk has obviously been in Chongshan Temple for many years. I think that no matter how accurate the Pope's astrology is, his understanding of the sacred source can't be more than that old monk's. How can we give up such a good opportunity? As for becoming a target for everyone, I've thought about it. We just need to let those guys outside know that we didn't get anything practical. In this case, at least the Vatican and the Greek protectors won't act rashly. How much trouble can a mere covenant of darkness cause in Chongshan Temple?" Ryu nodded and said, "What you said makes sense. However, in this way, we'll be completely exposed." Su Dong said, "It's hard to say that we'll be exposed, but I'm afraid that all parties will think that we're involved. Who hasn't seen us? What boss said makes sense. Right now, accurate information is the most important thing for us. Moreover, it's not a bad thing to have a good relationship with that high monk of Chongshan Temple. Let's go." Chi-Yu leaped up and took the lead, rushing towards Chongshan Temple at the foot of the hill. Ming Ming, Ryue, and Su Dong followed closely behind. With such a short distance, they arrived at the periphery of Chongshan Temple in a few blinks of an eye. At this time, Chi-Yu didn't hide his aura at all, but no one came up to stop him. Whether it was the Covenant of Darkness or the Spirit Devourer Hall, they were all eager for someone to go in and scout the way. With a light leap, Chi was already inside Chongshan Temple. As soon as he entered the range of the temple, the powerful coercion appeared again, or it could be said that the coercion had always been there. For the people of the Spirit Devourer Hall, this might be a huge pressure, but for Chi, this pressure didn't have much impact. As the heir of the bloodline of the King of Divine Beasts, Kirin, even when his strength was still relatively weak, he didn't flinch in the face of the pressure from the patriarchs of the 4 major clans. How could this pressure affect him now? The sea of bitterness is boundless. Repent, and you'll be saved. Don't you remember? The old and loud voice sounded again. The Sarira bead on Chi-Yu's wrist suddenly lit up. With a flash of light, the fluorescent luster seemed to blend into the surrounding coercion. Chi-Yu, who had to rely on his own thundercloud force to resist, suddenly felt his body lighten, and all the pressure was completely gone. The door of Qian Sun Temple opened, and the original coercion suddenly turned into a peaceful aura. Chi saw the old monk again, but this time, the old monk looked much gentler than before. His long white brows moved slightly, and he looked up at Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu was at the front, so naturally, he was the first to meet the old monk's gaze. He was suddenly stunned, because what he saw was not as simple as a pair of eyes. From the old monk's slightly yellowish gaze, he saw a deep ocean of silence and peace. That feeling of tranquility was because of the aura of the Sarira bead on his hand. The peaceful feeling filled his chest, and the negative effects of cultivating Kirin's ascending cloud technique finally disappeared at this moment. Clasping his hands in front of his chest, Chi-Yu said respectfully, "Greetings, Master. I'm really sorry to disturb you so late at night." The old monk's gaze turned from Chi-Yu to the Sarira bead on his hand. That yellowish gaze suddenly shot out two beams of light. Although it was just a flash, Chi-Yu could clearly feel his Sarira bead heating up. The old monk said indifferently, "Benefactor, you were able to obtain the help of a Buddhist treasure. You're no longer on the same path as those rascals from before. May I know why you are here?" The old monk's voice was not loud, but it had an indescribable deterrent effect on one's mental strength. Chi-Yu said, "Our purpose here is to protect everything here. We do not wish for the Buddhist sacred ground of Yin Huang to be polluted." The old monk smiled indifferently and said, "Benefactors, you may leave. All dharmas are empty, and everything is determined by fate." Ming Ming could not help but say, "Master, we are here to help you. There are many bad people here who want to come to the temple to take something." The old monk closed his eyes and said indifferently, "If it is yours, it is yours. If it is not, what is the use of forcing it? I do not need your help. Although benefactors have good intentions, Chongshan Temple is a sacred ground of Buddhism. It is late. I will not keep you any longer." Chi-Yu frowned slightly. The old monk in front of him looked a little unreasonable. Ming Ming saw the Sarira bead on his wrist, but did not seem to trust them. Su Dong wanted to say something, but was stopped by Chi-Yu. "If that is the case, we will not disturb Master's rest. When Chongshan Temple is in danger, we will definitely not sit back and watch. Let's go." With that, Chi-Yu turned and walked out. As he turned around, he quietly released his Qilin aura. A faint black and silver light revolved around his body, faintly discernible. "Wait a minute." The old monk's voice was a little surprised. Chi-Yu turned around and looked at the old monk who had opened his eyes again. "Master, do you have any more pointers?" The old monk looked at Chi-Yu carefully and said, "If I am not wrong, Benefactor seems to have inherited the bloodline of the king of mythical beasts." Chi-Yu smiled. "That is right. I am this generation's Kirin." Facing this monk of unknown age, he did not hide his identity at all. The old monk sighed. 100 years of vicissitudes. Yin Huang has gone through hardships, and Kirin has appeared again. Good. Benefactors, please follow me." With that, he turned and walked towards Qian Sun Temple. Chi-Yu hesitated for a moment. His hesitation was not because of the old monk, but because of the people waiting outside. His original plan was to have all discussions with the old monk outside after arriving here. This was to prevent the Covenant of Darkness, the Vatican, or the Greek guardians from thinking that he had obtained the sacred source. However, the old monk had invited them into Qian Sun Pagoda. It would be strange if they did not misunderstand him. However, Chi-Yu only hesitated for a moment before he followed the old monk into Qian Sun Pagoda. So what if they misunderstood him? He was Kirin. He had inherited the bloodline of the king of mythical beasts. How could he retreat? At that moment, a dark red figure suddenly appeared beside the old monk. A sharp claw instantly grabbed the old monk's neck. As it was too fast, even Chi could not react in time. What was even more terrifying was that when the dark red figure appeared, even the Buddhist Chi around the old monk's body was pushed away. The air within a 10-meter radius seemed to have frozen, and a strong, evil aura tainted the originally pure Chongming temple. The blood-red eyes were filled with a terrifying aura. "Watch out!" Chi shouted. His body moved casually, and his right hand reached out with all his might. A purple lightning suddenly flashed towards a claw. However, he was a step too slow. When he reached out, the claw had already reached the edge of the old monk's neck. However, he was still a step too slow. When he reached out, the claw had already reached the edge of the old monk's neck. The old monk did not panic. The golden light that he used to deal with the Soul Devourer Hall appeared again and collided with the claw. The claw came and retreated quickly. With a flash of golden light, the dark red figure had already retreated 20 meters away, just in time to avoid Chi-Yu's attack. Chi-Yu was afraid that the lightning he released would destroy Qian's Sun Pagoda. He quickly controlled his thundercloud force to make the lightning disappear. The old monk's body swayed slightly. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. He turned his head, and the Buddha Chi around his body instantly became fierce. Clearly, the old monk was enraged by the sneak attack. The one who suddenly attacked the old monk was the vampire prince of the Covenant of Darkness, Klinsmann. His surprise was no less than that of the old monk. Although he did not use his full strength because he did not want to kill the old monk, he was a vampire prince, and it was a sneak attack. He was confident that he would succeed. He had even calculated the Buddhist power around the old monk's body. But he did not expect that he would still fail. When his claw collided with the golden light emitted from the old monk, Klinsmann clearly felt that he was not attacking the old monk alone, but the entire Chongming temple. In that instant, it was as though the entire temple had become the old monk's defense, which was how his attack was neutralized. Ming Ming and Ruyue pounced at the same time. Ming Ming's seven-colored thundercloud force and Ruyue's Tyrannosaurus thundercloud force covered Klinsmann like a huge net. When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. Chi had been thinking about Su Qing. He did not want to let Klinsmann go when he saw him again. In a flash, he appeared on the other side of Klinsmann and used his Kirin's aura to cover his body. Although Klinsmann had always been arrogant, it did not mean that he was arrogant enough to think that he could deal with the three strongest Zodiac Guardian warriors at the same time. Seeing that Ming Ming and Ruyue had surrounded him, he immediately teleported and disappeared on the spot. It was teleportation again. Chi-Yu felt that he had lost his target on Klinsmann. He had to admit that the vampire prince's teleportation was a very annoying ability. Prajnaparamita is the great divine mantra, the great bright mantra, the supreme mantra, the supreme mantra. It can eliminate all suffering and is real. Therefore, the Prajnaparamita is the mantra. Seal. The old and sonorous chanting of the incantation was heard. The Buddha's light that had dimmed earlier appeared again. This time, the light emitted from the top of the three pagodas was even more intense. The Buddha's light shone on every corner of Chongming Temple, leaving no trace behind. Klinsmann grunted. His body appeared 10 meters away from the old monk. He was shocked to find that his teleportation ability had disappeared in an instant. Before he could do anything else, an invisible energy had already enveloped his body. Chi-Yu's shoulders shook slightly. Although his speed was not as fast as a vampire's teleportation ability, it was definitely not slow. He had broken through the four-cloud realm. Under the effect of the thundercloud force, his movement speed had increased. In a flash, he appeared in front of Klinsmann and swung his right fist at Klinsmann's chest. At his current speed and energy level, techniques were no longer important. Under the influence of the Buddha Chi, not only did Klinsmann lose his ability to teleport, but his speed had also become much slower. By the time Chi-Yu arrived in front of him, Klinsmann had no time to dodge. He raised his claws to block Chi-Yu's fist. Silver and black lights flashed for a moment. Chi-Yu's eyes turned as black as ink, and his hair turned silver. The energy of Kirin's arm exploded instantly. Klinsmann grunted again. With the force of Chi-Yu's punch, his body flew backward. His face became even paler. Ming Ming, Ruyue, and Su Dong jumped up almost at the same time. They intercepted Klinsmann from 3 different directions. Without teleportation, it was impossible for Klinsmann to escape from the siege of the 4 Zodiac Guardian warriors. However, Klinsmann was not alone. 5 black lights enveloped Klinsmann's body in an instant. The surrounding Buddha aura was forced back for a moment. Klinsmann's body flashed. Without the influence of the Buddha aura, he immediately used teleportation. When he appeared again, he was almost at the top of Chong Ming Temple's wall. Chapter 87. Klinsmann stood on the wall and glared at Chiyu. His eyes glowed coldly. His body flashed and disappeared into the darkness. Chiyu did not chase after him. What a joke. Klinsmann had the ability to teleport away from Chong Ming Temple. Even if he chased after him, he would not be able to catch up. Moreover, the people from the Covenant of Darkness might be lying in ambush outside the temple. Taking a few steps forward, Chiyu came to the old monk and asked with concern, "Master, are you all right?" The old monk shook his head. "It is indeed an aura from the west. No wonder you would appear. Come." As he spoke, he led Chiyu and the other 3 into the Thousand Search Tower. What surprised Chiyu was that the Vatican and the Greek Guardian did not appear in this situation. Putting the Greek Guardian aside, he and the Vatican were currently in a cooperative relationship. Were they not afraid that he would get the Holy Source first? On the surface, if he was a member of the Vatican, he would definitely ask to enter the Thousand Search Tower as soon as he saw this situation. Thinking about it, Chiyu and the other 3 followed the old monk into the Thousand Search Tower. The first floor of the Thousand Search Tower was very spacious, but also very simple. It did not have the holy aura of the outside. It even looked a little run down. There was only a large bed, a wooden table, and a few chairs in the tower. The old monk wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. "Have a seat." Chiyu's eyes swept around and landed on the old monk again. "Master, have you been living here all this time?" "I asked around before coming here. The 3 pagodas are considered tourist destinations. Aren't you afraid of being disturbed by practicing in a place like this?" The old monk smiled. "Ordinary people are not allowed to enter the Thousand Search Tower. I've been here for a few years. Why not practice Buddhism? Why would I leave?" "Chiyu, how are your injuries?" "The one who ambushed you just now was a vampire prince from the Covenant of Darkness. His abilities are not weak." The old monk shook his head. "His aura has completely sunk into darkness. Although he can use his aura to injure me in a collision, his dark energy has no effect on me. You don't have to worry. Besides, life is not essential to me." "Chiyu, has Reverend been guarding Chong Ming Temple all this time?" The old monk smiled calmly. "I came here when I was 22, he said. "It's been more than 100 years, but I can't remember the exact year. Although this place used to be isolated from news, I could still hear some news of Yin Huang becoming stronger. This was very gratifying to me. The country doesn't need us to do anything. I can stay here and protect this pure land." Su Dong said in shock. "Over 100 years? Doesn't that mean Master is over 100 years old?" The old monk said, "I didn't expect that after spending more than 100 years here in peace, I would have to face another battle. Chong Ming Temple was the core of this battle. If it's possible, I hope that all of you can help me protect the pure land of Chong Ming Temple. Don't let those external evils destroy it." "It's my duty," Chiyu said resolutely. Although he was once a hooligan, a ruffian, but the Yinhuang Republic was his motherland. If external enemies wanted to destroy everything in his motherland, how could he sit back and watch? Although he knew that the goal this time was the divine origin, when the old monk calmly made his request, he agreed without hesitation. Ruyue, Ming Ming, and Su Dong all nodded. Their thoughts were the same as Chiyu's. As the guardians of the East, if they couldn't even protect the holy land of their motherland, then what kind of guardians were they? The old monk showed a rare smile. "If the previous generation of Zodiac guardians were as strong as you, perhaps our motherland wouldn't have to go through so many hardships." Thinking of the old monk's age of more than 100 years, Chiyu had a thought. "Reverend, have you seen the previous generation of Zodiac Guardian warriors?" The old monk sighs and nods his head lightly. That was a very long time ago, but I still can't forget everything. Perhaps you didn't know that I was the previous generation of Zodiac Guardian warriors, Tianyin. Ah, the four of them exclaimed at the same time. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock. The old monk smiled. Is it strange? You don't need to think too much. I'm not from a bet. To be precise, the previous generations of Tianyin and the Zodiac Guardian warriors have their own uncertainties. That year, the previous generation of Kirin died in the hands of his fellow Yanhuang compatriots due to special circumstances. I knew that everything was irreversible. Disheartened, I fought with all my might, but to no avail. In the end, all the Zodiac Guardian warriors sacrificed their lives for the country. Only I, who was still very young at that time, returned to Chongming Temple after losing all hope to Buddhism. Buddha has blessed us. Perhaps Buddha has seen everything that the Zodiac Guardian God warriors have done. Our Yanhuang nation has once again stood among the nations of the world and become strong again. Seeing all this, I can't imagine how happy I am. But I understood that no matter how strong the country was, it still needed the protection of the Eastern Guardian in the dark. And I also predicted that in the near future, no matter if it was our country or the world, there would be a calamity. In order not to repeat the same mistakes, I began a long search. Perhaps you didn't know, but the previous generations of Tianyin were all chosen by the previous generation's Tianyin. Chi was pleasantly surprised. Then you know Reverend Zagru? The old monk smiled and shook his head. No, I don't know him. Back then, when he was born, I found his master. After many years of searching and exploration, I finally found his master. After many years of searching and exploration, I finally realized how important Tianyin was to the Zodiac Guardian warriors. After many years of searching and exploration, a powerful Tianyin played a vital role in the Zodiac Guardian warriors' cultivation. Therefore, I taught this mission to his master. As a Buddhist sect, there have been many eminent monks in Tibet. From the foundation of Buddhism, they're the best choice for the next generation's Tianyin. Therefore, after I passed on my mission, I returned to Chongming Temple. Everything was as I predicted. The new generation of Zodiac Guardian warriors has finally appeared. Looking at all of you valiant and heroic, you all have greater potential than the previous generation's Zodiac Guardian warriors. I'm very gratified. Chi said, then why did you let us go previously? I think you should have discovered our identities when you saw us just now. After all, you are the previous generation's Tianyin. The old monk sighed and said, I've already sensed what all of you can feel. Dali is no longer peaceful. I also know why they are here. The enemy is too strong. I don't want to implicate anyone. I think the Zodiac Guardian warriors are not completely gathered now. I don't want any harm to come to you. Later on, I discovered Ink Kirin's aura and powerful energy waves on you. Only then can I be sure that you have the strength to help me. If it wasn't for the Pure Land of Chongming Temple, I really don't want you to participate in this. Chi furrowed his brows. Reverend, we are the guardians of the East. It is our responsibility to protect the East. Why do you say that? The old monk's eyes revealed the sorrow of death. Perhaps it's because we suffered too much in the past. When the Zodiac Guardian God warriors become truly strong, they would become the strongest existence in the world. However, before you truly grow up, you are still relatively weak. It's not that I don't want you to protect the East, nor am I doubting your determination to protect the East. But I don't want you to make unnecessary sacrifices. When necessary, give up some things and bear with it. When you are confident, then carry out your mission. That is the best choice. Looking at the old monk, Chi recalled what Zagru had said to him in the past. At the same time, he was more and more interested in the strength of the Zodiac Guardian warriors when they were all gathered. According to the two previous sky guides, once all the Zodiac Guardian warriors were gathered, there seemed to be a qualitative leap in strength. I'm sorry, Reverend. I misunderstood you. Let's get back to the topic. Initially, we didn't know why those Westerners and people from the Sun Nation came to Yanhuang. After much investigation, we finally got the news. So they're here for something called the Sacred Source. What is it? To those Westerners, is it really that useful? The old monk nodded and said, their judgment is correct. The sacred source that they speak of is actually a living relic. Chiyu's body shook. Living relic? But as far as I know, a living relic is not an attractive energy. This time, it was the old monk's turn to be shocked. Could it be that you have seen a living relic before? Chiyu nodded. Reverend Zagru himself has a living relic. I have heard him mention it before. It is a Buddhist treasure that requires 10 lifetimes of Buddhist power to cultivate. Its Buddhist power is immense. The old monk's eyes revealed a look of joy. Seems like my choice was right. Back then, I judged that the baby had great potential. Indeed, he finally gave birth to a living relic that truly belongs to our Buddhist sect. Chiyu was a little confused. Reverend, can you explain it more clearly? I don't quite understand. The old monk said, the living relic in Chongming Temple is different from the ones you have seen. From the perspective of Buddhism, a relic refers to a Buddhist treasure left behind by an eminent monk after his death. Just like the relic bracelet in your hand. It is a Buddhist treasure left behind by 10 generations of eminent monks in Tibet. However, following the development of Buddhism, the chances of a relic appearing has gradually increased. The Buddhist power contained within it is also divided into different levels. As for a living relic, it is the highest existence among the relic. Not only does it require 10 lifetimes of Buddhist power, but it also requires a person born with Buddhist roots to be able to cultivate and integrate the 10 lifetimes of Buddhist power. However, this is not the only chance for a living relic to form. There is another situation where a living relic can be cultivated. Another situation? What is that? From what you said, this living relic in Chongming Temple seems to be very different from Reverend Zagru's relic. The old monk nodded. That's right. There is an essential difference. To be precise, this living relic in Chongming Temple does not belong to our Buddhist sect. You should have heard Zagru talk about the ancient beasts. At that time, the East was ruled by the ancient divine beasts and ancient ferocious beasts. When some 10,000-year-old divine beasts or ferocious beasts die, they will leave behind an NEI pill. If they're strong enough, the NEI pill can turn into a solid form. Its texture is like our relic. We call a giant beast relic. The probability of such a giant beast relic appearing is much lower than the relic of our eminent monks. Regardless of whether it is a ferocious beast or a divine beast, for a giant beast relic to appear after their death, they must have a very kind heart. At the same time, they must accumulate thousands of good deeds to have a chance of success. All of those must be good deeds that come from the heart. Chiyu asked, then what is the use of this giant beast relic? The old monk said, a giant beast relic is the accumulation of all the energy essence of a dead giant beast. Although the energy will undergo some qualitative changes after forming a giant beast relic, even after the changes, the energy contained in the giant beast relic is still similar to our Buddhist relic. This is also the reason why we call it a relic. This is because the energy of these ancient beasts is much stronger than that of humans. Therefore, the energy contained in a giant beast relic is naturally greater than that of our Buddhist relic. Among these giant beast relic, the most precious is the creation of a living giant beast. Living giant beast relic has only appeared twice in history. Those 2 times, they helped 2 of your ancestors, the Kirin clan. The Kirin clan is also the only ancient giant beast that has formed a living giant beast relic. Living giant beast relic belongs to the Kirin clan? Chiyu's mouth opened wide in shock. The old monk smiled faintly and said, although in theory, any ancient giant beast can form a giant beast relic, it is indeed too difficult. The cost of forming a 10,000-year-old giant beast is already very difficult. It is even more difficult to have thousands of good deeds. Therefore, the formation of a giant beast relic is already very difficult. The formation of a living giant beast relic is 10 times more difficult than a giant beast relic. Only the Kirin clan can have it. There are 3 main prerequisites for a living giant beast relic to appear. First, the formation of a living giant beast relic is not something that can be done by a divine beast or a ferocious beast alone. Only when a divine beast and a ferocious beast form a pair of husband and wife, and they are completely in love with each other and pay the price of their lives for each other. This condition is already very difficult. It is not that there are no divine beasts and ferocious beasts, but the chances are too low. Only the romantic Kirin clan can attract the ferocious beasts' liking and make them fall in love with each other. The second condition is that at least one of the husband and wife has to reach the psychic realm. You can understand it as another realm above the 10,000-year-old giant beast. In the entire ancient giant beast era, the number of giant beasts that can reach the psychic realm will not exceed 2 digits. F*CK. With this kind of probability, there's almost no chance of this living giant beast relic appearing. Chi wanted to say F*CK, but he was too embarrassed to say it in front of the old monk. The old monk smiled faintly and said, "The last condition is the most difficult. In order to form a living giant beast relic, it can only appear when the male of the couple dies and the female happens to be pregnant. The living giant beast relic is the child that the female is pregnant with. Let me ask you, even if the first 2 situations occur, who would be willing to let their child become a living giant beast relic? You must know that a living giant beast relic can inherit 70% of the couple's combined energy, but it cannot use it. It can only be used by others. No one doesn't want to obtain a living giant beast relic. No parent would want to see their child become the target of public criticism. Therefore, the formation of a living giant beast relic can only be a coincidence. Therefore, in the long, ancient giant beast era, it did not appear many times. Chi Yu and the other 3 were silent. After hearing the old monk's words, they could totally imagine the huge price that the divine beast and ferocious beast couple had to pay to form such a living giant beast relic. It was not as simple as paying. Chi Yu clenched his right fist and said, "Master, according to what you said, this living giant beast relic is actually an ancient giant beast." The old monk nodded and said, "That's right. That's right." Chi Yu continued to ask, "If one wants to obtain the energy in the living giant beast relic, what is the outcome of this ancient giant beast?" The old monk sighed and said, "If it is a passive absorption, then there's only one outcome, which is death. However, in history, the Kirin clan has always been active absorption because it is the Kirin clan that forms a living giant beast relic. When a living giant beast relic is willing to offer itself, although it will not die, its physical body will disappear completely. Only its soul will be connected to the owner who obtains its energy and become a part of the life of the person who absorbs it." Ming Ming's eyes were filled with tears. In that case, this ancient giant beast child that became a living giant beast relic is even more pitiful than its parents. From the day it was born, it was ready to become the target of others' energy absorption. Regardless of whether it is active or passive, it cannot truly exist. Chi Yu said, "Master, is the Kirin clan really so cruel? Do they want to absorb the energy of their own kind to make themselves stronger?" The old monk shook his head gently and said, "No, of course not. As the king of the divine beasts, Kirin only has kindness in his heart. Why would he do such a thing? In history, the 2 absorptions were completed under special circumstances, and they were the same situation. I can only say that the 2 most famous kings of the Kirin clan during the era of the ancient giant beast did not wish to obtain the energy of the living giant beast relic. However, in the end, due to a free combination of factors, it still helped them. As for this young lady's question, I am unable to answer it. I have only heard about the situation of the living giant beast relic fusing with its host. As for the actual situation, not only do I not know, no one in this world knows. However, I have once thought that if the host's strength is strong enough, he might be able to use the solidification of energy to condense a new body for the living giant beast relic. After all, everything in this world can be measured by energy. Ryue held up Ming Ming's hand and said, "What a pitiful living giant beast relic. No matter what, we cannot let those Westerners get it. Don't worry, Master. We will definitely do our best to protect it." The old monk let out a long sigh and said, "I don't know why, but I always feel that the appearance of the living giant beast relic has its own destiny. It is not something that can be controlled by humans. This penniless monk will thank you on its behalf for your kind intentions. It is now cultivating on the highest floor of the pagoda. Every year at this time, it is the period when its energy is the most unstable. It needs to cultivate for a period of time to recover. Chiyu was moved and said, "Master, can that living giant beast relic have its own strength?" The old monk nodded and said, "Although the living giant beast relic is extremely pitiful, it has its own merits. Its long lifespan is one of them. As long as no one absorbs the energy it possesses, then it could continue to live unaffected by the passage of time. As for cultivation, although it can possess a certain level of strength, no matter how hard it works, in the end, its strength can only be about 30% of the strength of the stronger parent. Generally speaking, it is the strength of Kirin's side. At its peak, 30% of Kirin's strength is not weak. However, it is too difficult to cultivate the living giant beast relic. After all, it only has 50% of Kirin's bloodline. 50%. That was his own compatriot. With a bloodline similar to his, Chiyu's heart was beating faster and the blood in his body was boiling. After talking to the old monk, he knew that his purpose of coming here had completely changed. At this time, no matter what, he could no longer think of destroying the living giant beast relic. At this moment, Chiyu suddenly had a thought and said in surprise, "Why is Master Zagru and the rest here? Oh no, there are so many enemies outside. Let's go out and help them." After saying that, he did not even have the time to apologize to the old monk. He immediately rushed out of the Qian Sun Pagoda. Chiyu was very familiar with Zagru's aura. Heaven's guidance and Kirin were inseparable. As soon as he left the Qian Sun Pagoda, he sensed that Zagru and the other Zodiac Guardian warriors were already surrounded. All sorts of lights flashed outside Chongming Temple. Clearly, they had already started fighting. Chiyu looked up to the sky and let out a long roar. His eyes shone brightly, and he put his hands together in front of his chest. Black and silver lights shot up into the sky. A huge shadow of Kirin with a surging energy aura caused heaven and earth to change. Chiyu stepped on a four-colored cloud and soared into the sky. His body quickly completed the true form mutation in the air. Under the black Kirin armor, the Kirin bead on his chest released a dazzling light, and the Kirin on his back enveloped his body. Silver light swirled around his right arm. Like a meteor chasing the moon, he rushed towards the center of the battle outside. His body was in the air. Chi could already see Zagru leading Vol, Yin Xiaoi, Hu Guang, Yin Guanping, and Modi. They were surrounded by a large group of men in black. Among these men in black, all the experts of the Covenant of Darkness were present. Wolf King Garnet, Bear King Baslu, Vampire Prince Klinsman, and their subordinates. Apart from the experts of the Covenant of Darkness, the people of Soul Devourer Hall were also lying in wait. They seemed to have reached a tacit agreement with the Covenant of Darkness. All of them were hiding in the dark aura, ready to strike at any time. On the ground, several demon wolfmen were screaming miserably. From the green smoke rising from their bodies, it was obvious that they had been poisoned by Hu Guang's snake venom. Perhaps because of the overbearing snake venom, all the experts of the Covenant of Darkness, except for the Raging Bearmen who did not participate in the battle, were frantically attacking Zagru's group of 7 in the form of energy under the leadership of the 3 Kings of Darkness. Obviously, they wanted to take advantage of the fact that the Zodiac Guardian warriors had not gathered together to annihilate them. On the side of the Zodiac Guardian warriors, Modi, Guanping, Hu Guang, and Ian had completed their own Zodiac transformation. This was the first time Chi Yu had seen Hu Guang and Ian after their transformation. Hu Guang's body was covered in a layer of dark green scales. His body had become much more slender than before. He was constantly moving at high speed, weaving between the energy of the enemy's attacks. But because the enemy's attacks were too concentrated, the huge dark energy was full of oppressive pressure, making it difficult for him to use his snake venom. On the other hand, Ian's Zodiac transformation was more special. Just as Hu Guang had said, after completing the transformation, a large part of his head was bald, and a layer of black and white hair appeared on his body. Whether it was Hu Guang or Ian, they were not strong fighters among the Zodiac Guardian warriors. At this time, they could only rely on their dexterity and speed to deal with the enemy. To Qi Yu's surprise, not only Modi and Guan Ping were at the forefront, but Yin Xiaoyi was also there. At this time, Xiaoyi's body was emitting a layer of gray light. His body was constantly advancing and retreating, and every time he rushed forward, he would bring out a stream of gray energy. The effect of the energy was very strange. It could actually offset part of the dark energy. Vol was guarding beside Zagru. His chubby hands turned into a sky full of palm shadows, dissolving the dark energy that seeped in one by one. Among the current Zodiac Guardian warriors, the strongest were obviously Qi Yu and the other three who had entered Chongming Temple first. If it was only Vol and the other five, it would be impossible for them to resist the crazy attack of the Covenant of Darkness powerhouses. However, there was another person among them, and that was Zagru. Standing in the middle of the 6 Zodiac Guardian warriors, Zagru put his palms together in front of his chest, chanting something in a low voice. Circles of white light constantly emitted from his body. The milky white light looked so gentle, and each circle of light could take away a large amount of dark energy launched by the Covenant of Darkness. It was like the dark energy that was washed away by the Buddha's light in Chongming Temple. The strength of Zagru's Buddha's power was so strong that even the old monk in Chongming Temple could not compare to it. He had inherited the Buddha's power of 10 lives, and although his dharma might not have reached the realm of an eminent monk, his Buddha's power was absolutely strong. Therefore, although the Zodiac Guardian warriors were at an absolute disadvantage, it seemed impossible for the people of the Dark Parliament to break through their defense. Obviously, Zagru contributed the most in resisting the enemy's attack, followed by Hu Guang. If it were not for Hu Guang's poison, the enemy would have launched a strong attack. Qi Yu's long roar made all the Zodiac Guardian warriors feel refreshed. The light emitted by Zagru changed slightly, and 6 beams of white light entered the bodies of the 6 Zodiac Guardian warriors, increasing their energy by more than 30%. Because Modi's legs were so fast, it was as if a barrier had appeared in front of him, and he immediately kicked back several Devil Ronin who could not resist in time. Guan Ping's performance was even more obvious. His solid muscles swelled up a little, and he stepped back slightly. He put his hands together in front of him, and a golden egg of light suddenly appeared. It collided with the dark red light emitted by Vampire Prince Klinsman in the air, causing a rain of light to fall all over the sky. Guan Ping's strength was obviously not as good as Klinsman's, but with Zagru's continuous Buddha's power, Klinsman's strength was greatly reduced, and this time they were evenly matched. Klinsman shouted, "Soul Eater of the Sun Nation, are you looking at a painting? What are you waiting for?" With a sharp roar, the Soul Eater who were hidden in the surroundings quickly moved. In fact, it was not that they did not want to cooperate with the Covenant of Darkness to launch an attack, but the Buddha's power emitted by Zagru was their greatest enemy. Previously in Chongming Temple, they had already lost 6 masters. However, in this situation, they also understood that if Qi Yu joined the battle, their chances would be even slimmer. Therefore, they had no choice but to move. Klinsman pointed his right hand at Qi Yu in the air and shouted, "Baslu, take your people and stop them." Although Qi Yu was the first to rush out of Chongming Temple, Ru Yue and the others were not slow either. At this time, they had also risen into the air and followed closely behind Qi Yu. The Berserk Bear Men, who had not joined the battle earlier, instantly entered a berserk state when Baslu the Bear King roared. Their huge bodies gathered together like a huge wall. Baslu the Bear King roared at Qi Yu in a provocative manner and swung his fist through the air. A ball of highly condensed energy rushed directly towards Qi Yu. Qi Yu snorted coldly and said, "Leave these big guys to me. You guys go and assist Grandmaster and the others." His flying body descended in an instant. At this time, however, The first thing that Chiyu attacked was not the Bear King or his Berserk Bear Men. Kirin's 100 lightning strikes. The black and silver light around his body suddenly disappeared and was replaced by a strong purple light filled with a strong repulsive force. Unexpectedly, it forcibly deflected the Bear King's attack to one side. Within the purple light, Chiyu's body constantly flashed with strong electric light. A black cloud condensed above his head. A purple beam of light, about half a meter in diameter, soared into the sky and merged with the black cloud. The black cloud was immediately surrounded by electric light, and the energy aura became extremely unstable. Chapter 88. Basler the Bear King had a look of disdain on his face. With a wave of his right hand, all the Berserk Bear Men squatted down almost at the same time and covered their heads with their hands. A layer of keratin-like energy condensed on the surface of their skin. Needless to say, it was insulating. Not only were these Berserk Bear Men extremely strong in combat, they were even more frightening in terms of their defensive capabilities. Apart from being slightly afraid of Hu Guang's poison, they were not afraid of any other attacks. Baslu's reaction could not be said to be slow, but it was a pity that his plan failed. Over 100 bolts of purple lightning, as thick as an arm, instantly erupted amidst the rolling thunder. Chiyu had now fully entered the four-cloud realm, and his thundercloud force had even reached the cloudless level. This time, his Kirin's 100 lightning strikes could not be compared to the past. Not only was the strength of the energy clearly increased by several times, but at the same time, the twisting bolts of lightning, as if they had eyes, accurately captured the location of their targets. Chiyu's targets were very simple. They were the Spirit Devourers from the Spirit Devourer Hall who had just pounced on the Zodiac Guardian warriors. If they were members of the Covenant of Darkness, perhaps they could rely on their darkness ability to resist for a while. However, the Spirit Devourers, who were also evil but were much weaker, were not so lucky. The bolts of lightning that were as thick as an arm accurately found their targets like homing missiles. For a moment, not even a scream could be heard. The entire area outside Chongming Temple immediately lit up with intense purple lightning. Amidst the lightning, a burning smell assailed the nostrils, and the Spirit Devourers fell one by one in the lightning, clearly becoming charred charcoal. With the help of Ryue and the others, the Zodiac Guardian warriors surrounding Zagru immediately felt much more at ease. Little E gave Chiyu a thumbs up. "Boss, you're strong. I finally know how to cultivate a human penis." Although Chiyu had dealt with the Spirit Devourer Hall's attack, as soon as he landed on the ground, he was immediately surrounded by the Berserk Bear Men who had reacted. Their huge bodies surrounded him tightly, and dozens of fists the size of a face smashed toward Chiyu. Chiyu snorted coldly. He knew that the bear men in front of him had extremely strong defenses, but that did not mean that they were flawless. Time to roast the bear paws. The thundercloud force around him rapidly transformed into thundercloud force. Two blinding flames lit up Chiyu's hands. His upper body leaned backwards, and he dodged two huge fists. At the same time, he made a circle with his hands, and Kirin, true fire of Kirin. Screams came from the mouths of the bear men at almost the same time. Chiyu stomped his right foot on the ground, causing the ground to tremble. Fiery hell. With a boom, surging flames rose instantly, spreading out from almost every crack. In an instant, the 8 Berserk Bear Men were engulfed in flames. Among these bear men, a few had been poisoned last time. Under the stimulation of the flames, the poison on their bodies that had not yet fully healed acted up again. Although the attack power of the Berserk Bear Men was strong, their biggest weakness was that they were not clear-headed enough. The sudden, intense burning pain immediately triggered their inauspicious stars, and they no longer had any control over themselves. When Chiyu was still at 3 clouds, if he continuously used Kirin's 100 lightning strikes and Kirin's fiery hell, it would be a huge test for his thundercloud force. However, now that he was at 4 clouds, his overall thundercloud force had risen to another level. More importantly, after practicing Kirin's ascending cloud technique, his thundercloud force's recovery speed was much faster than before. As soon as he used fiery hell, his right fist immediately turned into a black and silver light. He heavily punched the chest of a berserk bearman in front of him. Under the bombardment of Kieran's arm, the 4-meter-tall berserk bearman was immediately sent flying. Seizing this opportunity, Chi-Yu flashed out of the encirclement. His body was burning with flames, and he directly pounced on the vampire Prince Klinsman, who was constantly using his dark ability. Klinsman was extremely angry at this time, but Zagru's Buddhist energy was his greatest nemesis. He could not do anything to the Zodiac Guardian Warrior. Seeing that Chi-Yu was pouncing on him, Klinsman's anger suddenly surged. His eyes became bloodshot, and he spread his wings. The blood-red light was like a rhythmic wave. This time, he did not use teleportation, but rushed towards Chi-Yu. "Kieran, don't use my mystic steps." Klinsman did not retreat, and neither did Chi-Yu. He hated Klinsman's teleportation ability to leave the battlefield at any time. Since Klinsman had chosen to fight head-on, it was a good opportunity for him to test the strength of the four clouds. Time seemed to stand still at this moment. The four colors of the Kieran pearl on the chest of the Kieran armor suddenly separated, and the four colors rushed out of the pearl at the same time. A strange scene appeared, for shadows rushed out of the black Kieran armor at the same time. They were purple, blue, red, and green. They were four shadows of Chi-Yu. The four shadows gathered at the same time, and four different types of thundercloud force burst out. With the increase of thundercloud force, Chi-Yu had better control of his Kieran skills. However, Klinsman was indeed a super vampire closest to the Blood Emperor level. In the face of this strange attack, he let out a sharp howl, and the red light around his body instantly turned gold. His body turned nimbly in the air, and he abruptly stopped his forward momentum. Sharp claws shone around his body, and at the tip of the claws, a 1-meter-long golden light met the four shadows of Kieran almost at the same time. Lin, Chi-Yu, who was controlling his thundercloud force with all his strength, opened his eyes wide. In just a moment, the four shadows actually became more solid. Thunder, fire, wind, and water, the effect of four kinds of energy combining was definitely not as simple as 1 + 1. Among all of Kieran's abilities, the four magic clouds of Kieran had never been seen before. However, ever since Chi-Yu reached the 3 clouds level, he had been thinking about how to combine the 4 thundercloud force. When the 4 shadows got close to Klinsman, the thundercloud force and thundercloud force suddenly stopped, and the thundercloud force and water thundercloud force instantly accelerated. As long as it wasn't pure water, it could conduct electricity, let alone Chi-Yu's water thundercloud force, which was full of energy. The thundercloud force became the main attack, while the water thundercloud force played a role in amplification. These two thundercloud force were Chi-Yu's strongest, and they had both reached the 5 clouds level. In the dense thunder and lightning in the sky, Klinsman roared. The golden light emitted by his body was completely suppressed by the thundercloud force and water thundercloud force. At this moment, the stopped wind thundercloud force and fire thundercloud force overlapped in the air. The fire borrowed the power of the wind, and the fire thundercloud force instantly doubled in size. Klinsman groaned in his heart. Facing Chi-Yu's attack, he realized that this young man was much stronger than the last time they met. He didn't care about Chi-Yu's attack skills. No creature could be more sensitive than a bat. What surprised him was the strength of Chi-Yu's energy. The last time they met, Chi-Yu was obviously not as strong as him, but this time, the strength of his energy had completely suppressed his darkness supernatural ability. The golden light around his body was a manifestation of the extreme joy of practicing the darkness supernatural ability to the extreme. If he wanted to absorb the behemoth's relic, he needed to rely on this mutated ability. After the mutation, the energy in Klinsman's body would lose all the darkness aura. The energy situation was similar to the holy power of the Vatican, which could instantly increase his strength to the extreme. However, using this ability consumed a lot of his own energy. He would not use it unless he had no other choice. In his opinion, although Chi-Yu was very strong, he would be able to destroy him as long as he used this unique skill. However, when he collided with the water thundercloud force, which had been amplified by the thundercloud force, he realized that he had underestimated Chi-Yu. Under the crazy bombardment of the thundercloud force, Klinsmann's energy was forcibly blocked. At the same time, the feeling of numbness caused Klinsmann's speed to significantly slow down. What was more frightening was that the lightning energy was constantly bombarding his body like a great river. The explosive energy posed a great threat to him. At this time, it was difficult for Klinsmann to rely on teleportation because the energy in his body had been absorbed by Chi-Yu's thundercloud force. He could only use his ability again if he broke free or offset the thundercloud force in front of him. Chi-Yu's mind was completely focused on controlling the thundercloud force. After his own thundercloud force became stronger, he felt like a fish in water when controlling the thundercloud force. Being under the amplification of Kirin's 9 syllables, the thundercloud force besieging Klinsmann was strengthened again. Klinsmann grunted, and the darkness special ability in his body finally broke out under the strong stimulation. At this time, he no longer cared whether he was injured or not. Countless blood threads shot out from his body, forming a large web-like cocoon that enveloped his body. In the flashing light, Klinsmann roared, and all the blood in his body boiled. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Finally, he rushed out of the electric net before Chi-Yu could amplify it again. However, before Klinsmann could catch his breath, the flame phantom with the amplification of the wind, thundercloud force, and the intense Kirin's true fire had already covered his body. Klinsmann screamed, and the blood light around his body weakened significantly. Although the fire thundercloud force and the wind thundercloud force were not comparable to the thundercloud force and the water thundercloud force, Klinsmann was still not in his best state. However, Klinsmann was not in his best condition. He was injured and panicked under the attack of the Qilin True Fire. This time, Chi did not intend to give Klinsmann another chance. In fact, even he did not expect that he could trap Klinsmann with the attack of Kirin's Don't Use Mystifying Steps. Lin Bing Doja. Chi-Yu, who was behind the 4 clouds, could already use the Buddhist incantation of 9 words to amplify his power 4 times. The original red Kirin's true fire turned a faint blue under the 4-fold amplification. On the surface, the temperature of the flame had disappeared. However, only Klinsmann, who was deep inside the flame, knew that the Kirin's true fire had changed from an open flame to a yin flame. The energy in his body was greatly reduced under the effect of the true fire, and the wings on his back had a burnt smell. Just when Chi-Yu thought that he could defeat Klinsmann, he suddenly felt the arrival of danger. Although Klinsmann was completely in danger, Chi-Yu did not intend to kill him. It was not because Chi-Yu was soft-hearted, but because Chi-Yu wanted to find Su Qing's whereabouts from him. Kirin's Don't Use Mystifying Steps originally consumed a small amount of thundercloud force from Chi-Yu, but under his deliberate control and amplification, it now consumed a large amount of his thundercloud force and mental strength. As a result, Chi-Yu's body was currently extremely weak. The sudden crisis appeared on both sides of Chi-Yu at the same time. It was 2 extremely sharp energies. With a sharp sense of Kirin's aura, Chi-Yu clearly found that the 2 energies were full of evil aura. Although the intensity of the energy was far less than that of Klinsmann, the energy was very concentrated, just like when he faced the Scorpion Needle attack of So-So, the guardian of the Scorpio constellation. At this time, although the other Zodiac Guardian warriors had stabilized the situation, the members of the Covenant of Darkness were all strong. It would not be easy for them to win. Moreover, no one noticed that Chi-Yu had been attacked. In this situation, although Chi-Yu was shocked, he did not panic. He shouted, "Kirin Red." With a shout, surging flames instantly burned on Chi-Yu's body. The fiery red Kirin Red superimposed on the black Kirin armor. A huge energy aura immediately spread out. Chi-Yu clearly saw 2 faint black shadows appear on both sides of his body at the same time. The moment he summoned Kirin Red, the 2 needle-like energies had already attacked his body. It was not simple darkness, it was full of evil aura. When the aura came into contact with Kirin Red, the flames on Kirin Red immediately became stronger. However, Chi still groaned. He was shocked to find that although the evil aura could not penetrate his Kirin Red and Kirin armor, after the aura attacked his body, it actually split into several stages and exploded. Each explosion appeared right after the previous explosion. In the blink of an eye, it had completed 13 explosions. Even the Kirin armor could completely ignore one explosion, but the energy of 13 evil explosions was already very impressive, not to mention that it was an attack from both sides at the same time. The Qilin Scarlet and Qilin armor could not be broken by the opponent, but the violent impact caused Qiyu to taste sweetness in his throat and spit out a mouthful of blood. Fresh blood sprayed onto the Qilin bead, causing the Qilin bead's 4 colors to brighten. Qiyu let out a furious roar as his body slightly spun in the air, throwing away the 2 evil energies that had ambushed him. After being thrown away, the 2 evil energies did not continue to attack, but immediately disappeared into the darkness. Qiyu didn't even need to think to guess who had attacked him. Although the experts from the Sun Nation Spirit Devourer Hall were quite strong, none of them had the strength to fight against the Zodiac Guardian God warriors. Obviously, the 2 Spirit Devourers from the Spirit Devourer Hall weren't among them. It wasn't that the Spirit Devourers didn't come to Chongsheng Temple, but that they were waiting for an opportunity. Only when Qiyu and Vampire Prince Klinsman reached the most crucial moment did they suddenly launch a sneak attack. They had chosen the moment when Qiyu was at his weakest. The 2 first-class Soul Devourers did not kill Qiyu as they had hoped, but because of their influence, Qiyu needed the Fire Thundercloud Force to activate his Kirin Red, so he immediately relaxed his encirclement on Vampire Prince Klinsman. Klinsman had been famous for thousands of years, so how could he let go of this opportunity? When Qiyu was injured, he gathered his remaining courage and rushed out. This time, he would not rashly fight with Qiyu. He teleported over 100 meters away, gasping for air. Qiyu was furious, but he could not chase after the 2 first-class Soul Devourers. Klinsman was indeed injured by a series of attacks, but he was also injured. Compared to the 2 Sun Nation guys, Klinsman was obviously a much bigger threat. Stimulated by Qiyu's injury, the water thundercloud force in his body automatically activated Kirin muscle tendon changing and marrow cleansing, quickly healing the injuries in Qiyu's body. Klinsman gloomily looked at Qiyu. His originally pale face now had a tinge of red. Qiyu didn't know that this was a condition that would only appear when a vampire was seriously injured. For Qiyu, vomiting blood was to relieve the pressure of his injury. But for vampires, it was a different story. Vampires relied on sucking blood to survive. When they vomited blood, it meant that they had suffered serious injuries. Kirin's Thundercloud Force and Thundercloud Force were not so easy to deal with. At this time, they were wreaking havoc in Klinsman's body. His darkness special ability could barely be suppressed. On the surface, Klinsman did not seem to have much of a problem, but he did not have much ability to fight anymore. Ryue, Ming Ming, and Su Dong had all completed their origin form mutation. With their help, the Covenant of Darkness was gradually suppressed. At this moment, the flames around the Berserk Bear Men were finally extinguished. One had to admit that their defenses were very strong. They didn't die even after being burned by the Qilin's true fire. However, each and every one of them sat on the ground, gasping for breath. Their bodies had turned into the color of charcoal, and their berserk state had been removed. Therefore, the only ones fighting against the Zodiac Guardian warriors were the Wolf King Garnet, his demon wolfmen, and the 5 vampire dukes. The situation had taken a turn for the worse, and they were completely suppressed. "Stop!" Klinsman shouted in a low voice. All the members of the Covenant of Darkness immediately flew back. The demon werewolves pulled the raging bear men and surrounded him. The Wolf King Garnet and the Bear King Baslu surrounded him. The 2 looked at each other. Obviously, they did not expect Klinsman to lose. Klinsman pointed a finger at Qiyu. "Kid, this is the 2nd time. Let's go." Qiyu snorted coldly. "You want to leave? I'm afraid it won't be that easy. Hand over my friend." Klinsman snorted disdainfully. "Are you dreaming? I won't hand her over to you. Even if I do, so what? Can you guarantee her safety? Don't forget, she is now a real vampire. Staying by my side is the best choice. Chi-Yu's eyes flashed coldly. Klinsman, if you are not afraid that all the members of the Covenant of Darkness will die here today, you can choose not to call Ching-Er out. A strange smile appeared on Klinsman's face. Is that so? Do you think I care about the lives of these people? Compared to them, my sister's life is much more important. Don't forget that we are different from you. For us, as long as we can protect ourselves, there is nothing we can't sacrifice. The faces of the Bear King Baslu and the Wolf King Garnet changed. They knew that if the Easterners in front of them really wanted to keep them here, it was not impossible. Previously, they had fully experienced the power of the Zodiac Guardian God warriors. Their tenacious fighting will and powerful energy had left a deep impression on them. Among them, although Klinsman was seriously injured, he still had an escape artifact, instant teleportation. Only he could escape unscathed. There was no such thing as morality in the Covenant of Darkness. Klinsman was right. When the time came, he would definitely abandon them. Chi-Yu looked at Klinsman and suddenly smiled. It seems that His Excellency, the Vampire Prince, values Qing very much. Hearing Chi-Yu mention Su Qing, the coldness on Klinsman's face surprisingly disappeared a little, and a trace of gentleness appeared in his eyes. That's right. In this world, nothing is more important than my sister, not even my own life. Ming Ming came to Chi-Yu's side and said angrily, "You bigot! If you really like Qing, you shouldn't have turned her into a vampire." Klinsman said somewhat crazily, "What's wrong with turning into a vampire? We vampires have endless life. As long as I'm here, my sister won't even age. Isn't this the greatest wish of every woman? These are things that you humans can't do. I'm only thinking about my sister." Chi-Yu stopped Ming Ming, who was about to rush out. He smiled indifferently and said, "In that case, let's stop here for today." Chi-Yu, Ming Ming called out with some dissatisfaction. Chi-Yu smiled and said, "However, just because we're willing to let you go doesn't mean that they're willing to let you go." As he spoke, Chi-Yu pointed behind the people of the Covenant of Darkness. Klinsman was shocked. When he looked back, he saw dozens of figures quietly approaching them from behind. He couldn't be more familiar with the aura. Despicable. They're from the Vatican. Chi-Yu smiled indifferently and said, "Yes, it's them. To be honest, I don't really like these people from the Vatican. They're like the police in the movies, always appearing after things are over. However, it seems that their appearance at this time is fatal to you." As soon as Chi-Yu's voice fell, Lu Yuan's voice was heard. "Mr. Chi, I'm really sorry. We're late again. We rushed over as soon as we received the news. We didn't expect you to have already started fighting. How is it? Are you all right?" Chi-Yu said indifferently. "Do I look like I'm not? Since you're already here, I'll leave the people of the Covenant of Darkness to you." A smile appeared on Lu Yuan's face. Under the illumination of the starlight, he was the first to walk out of the shadows. It was unknown when he had changed into a formal suit. The paladins and knights of light that Chi-Yu had seen previously slowly appeared behind him, forming a semicircle that surrounded the experts of the Dark Parliament. However, Klinsman's handsome face became slightly distorted. "What a joke, Lu Yuan. Although we've suffered some damage, do you think that you can deal with us with just these people?" Lu Yuan smiled indifferently and said politely, "Of course not. You're a vampire prince. Moreover, you have 5 unscathed vampire Grand Dukes. We obviously don't have enough people. However, if we really only have these people, wouldn't it tarnish your reputation as a vampire prince?" Klinsman was already putting on a strong front. After hearing Lu Yuan's words, his expression changed drastically. He already felt that he hated even more, and this aura could completely threaten him. Behind the Knights of Light, 6 people walked out slowly. The person in the lead was dressed in a white robe and held a book in his hand. Upon closer inspection, it seemed to be a Bible. The 5 people behind him were all dressed in red robes. Each of them had calm expressions and placed their right hands on their chests as they walked out slowly. This time, not only did Klinsman's expression change, but the expressions of Wolf King Garnet, Bear King Baslu, and the other members of the Covenant of Darkness also changed. Klinsman's voice clearly became sharper. Cardinal Ogra is dead and 5 cardinals are dead. You really think too highly of me. Lu Yuan bowed respectfully to the 6 cardinals. The man in the white robe, whom Klinsmann addressed as Ao Gura, stepped forward slowly and nodded slightly. Greetings, respected vampire Prince Klinsmann. Klinsmann snorted coldly. Do you still think that I'm good to meet you under such circumstances? Ao Gura smiled and said, I don't want to meet you under such circumstances either. Although the Vatican and the Covenant of Darkness have always been at odds, it has been many years since people of our level have met each other. This time I have no choice. If your Highness can swear on the heaviest oath of the blood kindred to give up this operation of the Covenant of Darkness and send Mundo back to the Vatican, I can make the decision to let you leave. Klinsmann smiled. The smile on his handsome face made him look unusually gloomy. Ao Gura, are you kidding me? Mundo's position in the Covenant of Darkness is not inferior to mine. Not to mention me, even the Speaker would not dare to give him up easily. Moreover, he betrayed the Vatican and joined our side, bringing great benefits to the Covenant of Darkness. Now, he is the #1 hero of the Covenant of Darkness. Even if I swear on him, do you think it will work? A hint of sadness appeared in Ao Gura's eyes. That's a pity. There are only 2 cardinals in the Vatican. I never thought that Mundo would betray the Vatican. Your Highness, you can leave now. I know that even though you are injured, I can't make you stay. However, I'm afraid that your subordinates will have to follow us back to the Vatican to be judged.